Chapter 27-21. In order to break the engagement in front of the pillar of marriage, one had to pass the test of the pillar of marriage itself. The test of the pillar of marriage was targeted at people. It was said that there were many different kinds of tests. Some were very easy, and some were very abnormal. Therefore, there was no previous experience to speak of. It all depended on one's luck. If it was easy, everything would be fine. If it was abnormal, one might lose one's life. Because of this, once the people of the Fanning continent got engaged, they would not break the engagement easily. If a man was not satisfied with his fiancée, he could take in a bunch of concubines. Concubines would not be on the pillar of marriage. If they were not satisfied, they could divorce them at any time. Therefore, even if the men were not satisfied with their fiancée, they would just put up with it. They did not want to come to the misty mountain to look for trouble. As for the women who were not satisfied with their fiancés, their martial arts were all fancy and impractical. They could not fight their way up the misty mountain alone. Therefore, if the man did not want to come, the marriage could not be broken. They could only follow the original agreement and marry when they were of age. Therefore, although the pillar of marriage had been standing in the misty mountain for hundreds of thousands of years, there were very few men and women who successfully came to it to break the engagement. There was not even one pair in hundreds of years. In a deep valley, maple trees covered the valley. The autumn wind blew the maple leaves red. The red color of the valley was like the morning sun being pulled down and spread into the valley. The whole valley was dyed in layers of red. In the depths of the maple forest in the valley, there was a unique small wooden house. The house was surrounded by maple trees. In spring and summer, the maple leaves were green, and so was the small wooden house. In autumn, the maple leaves were red, and the small wooden house was hidden in red clouds like fire. Snow fell in the valley from the east, and the small wooden house was also covered in snow. In general, the small wooden house looked simple, but it was very good at hiding. Even if someone walked into the deep valley, they might not be able to find the small wooden house. Moreover, there was a formation boundary around the small wooden house, so no one could easily break in. There was a stream in front of the small wooden house. At this moment, the two sides of the stream were covered with a thick layer of red maple leaves. They were as soft as a crimson cushion. At night, the moonlight was like wine. At this moment, Ji Xinyue was lying on the cushion formed by nature. There was a wine gourd on her left, and a few plates of peanuts and edamame on her right. She took a sip of wine and ate a few peanuts and edamame, looking extremely lazy and content. Every time she returned to this little nest that only she knew about, she felt exceptionally relaxed. This was her home, a home where she could rest her soul and forget all the troubles outside. Looking at the clouds in the morning, listening to the pines in the evening, he completely relaxed himself. He rolled around in the meadow, took a bath in the stream, caught a fish barefoot in the water, hunted some game in the forest. He was as carefree as a living immortal. Although Ji Xinyu usually liked to wander around the Fanning continent as Xinyu, he would still return here once every 3 to 5 years, either to meditate or to live freely like an ordinary person. Of course, she wouldn't stay here for too long, at most a month. After all, it was too quiet here. Not a single person could be seen. If one stayed here for a long time, the bone-piercing loneliness would invade one's body, making it hard for one to sit or lie down. Thus, one could only leave. Even so, she was still very relaxed every time she came back. This time, he was especially relaxed, because she only planned to rest here for 3 days. Chapter 27-22. The injuries on her body had not healed, but after using 2 spells in succession last night, it did not affect her injuries much. At most, the fading scars and fish scales showed signs of worsening. However, the veins in her body were not affected much. Ji Xinyue did not care much about her body and appearance. Anyway, she was not prepared to marry again. Whether it was ugly or beautiful, it was something she could see. As long as she did not care, why should she care so much? Therefore, she was prepared to rest here for 3 days. After recuperating, she would use the flying spell and lightness skill alternately to go to Misty Mountain. According to her estimation, she could reach the foot of the mountain in 5 days. She would use another 2 days to climb the mountain and kill monsters. That would be enough time. Since she had already made a plan, she simply emptied her mind and drank freely. The wine was the red leaf wine that she had buried under the maple tree 3 years ago. It tasted as spicy as burning knives, but it was a little cooler than burning knives. After drinking it, it felt warm and comfortable. She was cautious in everything outside and almost never got drunk. Last night was an exception. That was because she did not know that the wine that Rongyue Tianlan brought would have such a strong aftereffect. If she had known, she would not have drunk so much. Of course, she did not have so many scruples when drinking here. Getting drunk was a common thing. Anyway, no matter how drunk she was, no one would disturb her, and no one would sneak up on her. Of course, no one knew what she was like when she was drunk. She did not know herself either, because every time she was drunk, her mind was blank. When she woke up the next day, she did not know what she would do when she was drunk. She realized that she was not honest when she was drunk. Sometimes she clearly felt that she was lying on the bed in the small wooden house, but when she woke up, she was on a tree, a stone, or even in a stream, and she was holding something in her arms, either a big stone or a wooden stick. The most frightening thing was that she was holding a long snake. Fortunately, when she was drunk, her sleeping position was a little strange when she woke up, and nothing major happened. What happened after she was drunk last night? Where did Rongyue Tianlan find her and carry her back to Nantian Palace? Originally, she had rushed to Rongyue Tianlan's place this morning to ask for an explanation. But after seeing that scene, and after everything that had happened, she felt that those questions were no longer important. It didn't matter if she asked or not. She drank the wine one mouthful at a time. Her watery eyes gradually became misty, and her cheeks turned red from the alcohol. The familiar feeling of dizziness grew stronger and stronger. The stars and moon in the sky were spinning, and the maple trees around her were spinning. Even her little wooden house seemed to be spinning. He was about to get drunk. She smiled, and a final thought flashed through her muddled mind. Rongyue Tianlan should be the first to see her drunk state. What did she look like when she was drunk? Should I ask him when I see him in the future? She was actually quite curious. After this thought flashed through her mind, she was completely drunk and did not know anything. The same sky, the same land. However, the location was different. Rongyue Tianlan was sitting on the moon-viewing peak from last night. The cold wind on the moon-gazing peak whistled, causing his clothes to flutter. He was also drinking wine, and the wine he was drinking was the same kind that had made Ji Shenyu drunk last night. Chapter 27-23. This kind of wine tasted soft, but it was extremely strong. Even with his alcohol tolerance, he would be knocked out if he drank an entire jar. But last night, Ji Shenyu drank half a jar, and it was under the condition that she was already drunk. By the time he realized it, the jar of wine had already been emptied. So he knew that she couldn't hold on for more than a quarter of an hour, and would definitely be knocked out after that. So after he brought her down the mountain, she had a strong personality, and probably didn't want anyone to find out her secret. So she simply said goodbye to him, turned around and walked away quickly, avoiding him like he was the plague. After all, he was still worried about her, so he followed her from afar. Firstly, he wanted to see if she would fall, and secondly, there were many fierce beasts in the mountain. If she fell on the road, she might be eaten by some wolf, worm, tiger, or leopard. He expected her to be drunk, but he didn't expect her to be so drunk, and even more so, he didn't expect her to be so charmingly naive after being drunk. His original plan was to send her out of the mountain, and if she didn't fall, he would let her be. If she fell, he would send her back to the palace quickly, and it wouldn't take much time. But Ji Shenyu didn't play by the rules. Even when she was drunk, she could still be drunk in a unique way. At first, she walked in a straight line, her clothes fluttering, but after a while, she began to walk in a swaying Z-step, her body twisting like a willow in the wind. She even giggled. Her laughter was as innocent as a silver bell. After that, she even began to hum a little tune, singing rhythmically and rhythmically. She was so drunk that she didn't even remember the lyrics of the song. He listened to her singing all the way, And he finally knew that she actually had a good voice. When she sang to her heart's content, she even danced under the moonlight. Because she was drunk, she also staggered while dancing, but her waist was softer than a willow, and her limbs were like the wings of a swan. When she danced, she was like a swan under the moonlight, full of a unique charm. Rongyue Tianlan was a famous musician and had a deep understanding of singing and dancing. He never thought that a person could dance like this, attracting the attention of a picky person like him. In this aspect, she was actually a genius. The dance she danced while drunk was original. Her movements didn't follow any rules, but it was strangely harmonious and strangely beautiful. At that moment, Rongyue Shenlin even wanted to take out her flute and play a song for her. However, he suppressed this thought. In front of him, Ji Shenyue had always been calm and collected, with the confidence of a man. After getting drunk, she finally revealed the naivety and innocence of a little girl, which amused him. His heart inexplicably softened, as if some kind of ripple was slowly spreading. Later, he found that she was not going down the mountain. She was running in a crooked direction towards a remote cave. Rongyue Tianlan naturally sensed that the cave was the lair of a unicorn. She was undoubtedly seeking her own death by bumping into it like this. On one hand, he secretly rejoiced that he had followed the right person. On the other hand, he took 2 steps closer to her. The Dharma seal in his sleeves was activated. He was prepared to save the person as soon as he realized that something was wrong. He thought that with Ji Shenyu drunk like this, she would rush in without thinking. However, he didn't expect that when she was about to reach the entrance of the cave, she would pull out her majestic machete. Her machete didn't look very special. Although it was made of meteoric iron, it wasn't considered a divine weapon. At most it was a sharp weapon. Chapter 27-24. However, it was this saber that was ranked second in the weapon manual written by the martial artists of the Fanning continent. In the weapon manual, this saber was called Azura saber. Many famous experts had fallen under this saber. It was rumored that when this saber appeared, wind and thunder would erupt, and the sun and moon would lose their light. It was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. Every time it appeared, it would inevitably cut off someone's life. The martial arts world passed down this saber as if it was a god, but only Rongyue Tianlan understood. What made this saber so awe-inspiring was not the saber itself, but the person holding the saber. It was because the person holding the saber was extremely powerful that this ordinary saber was able to squeeze into the weapon manual. Shenyu's name was much more famous than her own. He was the solitary deity ranked second in the martial arts world. Who would have thought that this famous deity was Princess Ji Shenyu, who had been demoted to be useless? Rongyue Tianlan knew that once her second identity was announced, it would probably cause a huge uproar in the entire Fanning continent. On this continent, this kind of expert was a talent that every clan fought over. It was said that the emperors of the 4 clans tried every possible way to extend all kinds of olive branches to this deity. Rongyue Tianlan's information was not ordinary. He also knew that the South Heaven Emperor had sent people to contact this deity Shenyu many times, promising all kinds of generous conditions that could kill people to poach him under his command. Ji Shenyu was probably afraid of exposing her identity in her own clan, so she had always ignored the olive branch that the South Heaven Emperor extended. This made the South Heaven Emperor feel that this person was cold and aloof, and wanted to rope him in more. It was said that in order to rope in this expert, he had worried so much that his hair turned white. If he knew that this Shenyu was the incarnation of the daughter he looked down on the most, what kind of expression would he have? He was actually looking forward to that day. But since Ji Shenyu did not want to make it public, she must have her own reasons. Naturally, he would not expose her. He saw Ji Shenyu break into the cave with the saber, and Rongyue Tianlan naturally followed. He saw that Ji Shenyu's vision was not good because she was drunk, so she walked in the cave and directly kicked the sleeping unicorn, successfully provoking this big guy to go crazy. Even if Ji Shenyu was drunk, her reaction was not slow, and she was not sent flying by the unicorn's claw. However, she had drunk too much and was half a beat slower during the fight. If Rongyue Tianlan had not secretly made a move to slow down the unicorn's movements by 3 beats, Ji Shenyu would probably have been torn apart alive. Such intense movements shook the alcohol in Ji Shenyu's body. She vomited in the middle of the battle, directly spraying the unicorn's face. This caused the unicorn, who loved cleanliness, to immediately break down. It actually ignored Ji Shenyu's large blade and directly used its claws to wipe its face. Not only did it wipe once, it even wiped a second time. Thus, the filth on its face was wiped clean, but its throat was also slit by the large saber, and it lost its little life. After the unicorn crashed to the ground, the drunk Ji Shenyu also sat on the ground. In the dark night, her pair of hazy eyes were abnormally bright. She was in a daze on the ground for a moment. Then, she actually staggered to the side of the unicorn's corpse and did something that Yu Tianlan would never have thought of. She pried open the unicorn's hooves and then dove into the unicorn's chest. Rong Yu Tianlan was dumbfounded. The unicorn loved cleanliness and had a body full of long fur, so its fur had always been as soft and clean as satin. Lying on such fur should not be uncomfortable, but this scene was still very shocking to the eyes. Chapter 27-25. A petite girl was lying in the arms of a long-haired beast. It was a classic Beauty and the Beast. Actually, because Ji Shenyu was very drunk, she showed her female appearance not long after she went down the mountain. Other than the clothes that were for men, every inch of her body was that of a woman. Her figure was very good. The places that should be protruding were protruding, and the places that should be perky were perky. Even if she was wearing a man's robe, the towering peaks in front of her chest could be seen. In her drunken state, she was probably afraid of the cold, so her body desperately squeezed into the unicorn's arms. Her little mouth was still mumbling, but it could be heard clearly. "Father, don't you love Shenyu anymore? Hug Shenyu." Rongyue Tianlan almost fell over. He never thought that she would actually treat the unicorn as her father. Her little face was filled with innocence and grievance, like a child who had yet to reach adulthood, longing for her parents' love. If she was sober, she would definitely not do this, and would not show such an expression that was similar to that of a little girl. But now that she was drunk, she spoke the truth after drinking, and she spoke the truth after drinking. She even took out a doll as if it was a treasure. "Father, look, I still have this doll. Father must love me very much in your heart, so you know that I like this. Father, can you buy another doll for Shenyu?" Her voice was delicate and tender, as if she was still that child who desperately wanted to be doted on by her parents. This scene was obviously very comical, but Rongyue Tianlan felt inexplicably sad. His heart that had always been hard seemed to have been cut open by someone, revealing the painful softness inside. She was drunk, so it was not a good idea to let her sleep in the arms of a dead unicorn. Rongyue Tianlan simply pulled her out of the unicorn's arms, then carried her in his arms and walked out directly. She was restless in his arms, and in a daze, she began to hug his waist again, calling him father, and mumbling for him to hug her again. Rongyue Tianlan did not know whether to laugh or cry. This was the first time in his life that he was called father. Although he was more than 1,000 years older than her, if he had married early, he might have been able to give birth to a daughter of this age. He really wanted to tell her that he was not her father, but her fiancé. However, arguing with a drunk person was undoubtedly asking for trouble. Seeing how much she craved fatherly love, he might as well pretend to be her father and gently comfort her and coax her. After they entered the city, he even bought her a big doll to hold. She was indeed very happy. She even leaned up and kissed him on the cheek. She hugged his neck, and the smile on her face was as bright as the moonlight in the sky. Her soft lips touched his face, causing ripples in his heart. He had the urge to fiercely kiss her back. Fortunately, he suppressed this thought in time, and brought her directly into an inn. She was still wearing a man's robe, so it was inappropriate to send her back like this. So he had to think of a way to change her clothes. Rongyue Tianlan was still a gentleman in this aspect. If he didn't have the intention to marry the other party, he wouldn't look at the other party's body. Even though he had been treating Ji Shenyu's injuries for the past few days, using a secret technique on her abdomen every day. It was still through her clothes. After he entered the inn, he used a spell to conceal her appearance. Then, he took out a long dress from her storage space and asked the owner of the inn to put it on for her. Then he brought her back to the palace and sent her back to her Jingxinyuan. Chapter 27-26. She had been hugging the doll, as obedient as the doll, making people reluctant to put it down. Rongyu Tianlan was actually quite conflicted. The moment he saw Ji Tianyue, the woman's figure that had been hazy in his mind suddenly became clear, and her appearance was highly similar to Ji Tianyue's. Especially that pair of crystal-clear eyes. They were exactly the same. He felt as if lightning had struck his heart. He didn't expect that the woman he wanted to find in his heart was actually his fiancée's sister. Ever since he returned to this continent, fragments of that woman flashed through his mind from time to time, such as that pair of clear eyes, that breathtaking dance, that innocent and unaffected personality. They were all shockingly similar to Ji Tianyue's. This made a series of lightning strikes flash through his heart. He originally came back with two goals. One was to break off the engagement with his fiancée, and the other was to find the girl in his heart. He thought that there was still a long way to go to find that girl. After all, in the vast sea of people, it was harder than ascending to the heavens to find a person whose face was blurred. He didn't expect to find her so quickly. At that moment, he didn't know how happy he was, and it was also the first time he was so agitated, directly leading people to find the South Sky Emperor. Fortunately, he still had some rationality. He felt that Ji Tianyue was still young, and he had an engagement, so it was not appropriate for him to tell the truth. So he planned to take it slow, first saying that he wanted to guide her in martial arts, and then come up with other plans. Of course, since he had identified Ji Tianyue as the girl in his life, he naturally didn't want to take her as a disciple. In this world, a relationship between master and disciple was not allowed. He didn't want to find a stumbling block for himself. The joy of finding the girl in his heart made him forget about Ji Tianyue for a moment. After all, the two of them had already agreed to break off the engagement after Ji Tianyue's injuries were healed. He should not owe her anything as long as he did his best to heal her. But after all, he had delayed Ji Tianyue's youth. He even planned to find a suitable opportunity to introduce a few of his outstanding young friends in this world to her after successfully breaking off the engagement with Ji Tianyue. No one would dislike such an outstanding girl. She would definitely be able to find her destined other half. He had always comforted himself like this, and had always done so. He felt that this was the most rational and appropriate way. He even gave himself a thumbs up in his heart for thinking this way. However, when he watched Ji Tianyue dance in the palace, he couldn't help but notice Ji Tianyue's expression. She had been hiding her emotions very well, so he couldn't see anything. But when she turned around and left quietly, his heart inexplicably sank. It was as if a small weight had fallen on him. At that time, he even had the urge to chase after her. Later on, he brought Ji Tianyue out. Firstly, it was to celebrate the festival with her. Secondly, deep in his heart, he wanted to find Ji Shinyue, who had never returned. Her injuries had not healed yet. If she used her martial arts outside, she was afraid that it would worsen her injuries. He felt that he was acting out of humanitarian concern, and did not see anything wrong with it. As expected, he bumped into her at the foot of Moon-Gazing Peak. Her relationship with Rongyu Tianhuan was clearly not bad. The interaction between the two of them gave him a strange feeling. He had never thought that this cousin of his was an eyesore. But after everything that had happened on Moon-Gazing Peak, he had the urge to make this cousin disappear. The interaction between Ji Xinyu, Rongyu, and Tianhuan seemed particularly disharmonious in his eyes. This emotion was a little strange, and he couldn't figure out what it was. Chapter 27-27. He just felt that his cousin was a playboy, and was not worthy of being with Ji Xinyu. This made him, a perfectionist, have the urge to break them apart violently. After he sent Ji Xinyu back to the palace, he checked her injuries again, and saw that the wounds had indeed worsened, but they were not much of a hindrance. At most, he would extend the treatment period for her for a few more days, but that was not worth much. In the depths of his heart, he faintly felt that the longer the treatment period, the better. He was shocked by his own thoughts, and felt that his emotions were a little off. When he returned to his courtyard, he was in a daze. He did not sleep the entire night, and when he was about to fall asleep in the morning, someone reported that the little princess was injured. She cried for half the night, and was now clamoring to see him. Only then did he remember Ji Tianyu, who he had flirted with. When he heard that she was injured, he hurried over. Ji Tianyu's injuries were actually not serious, and with his medical skills, she was naturally cured. He felt guilty towards Ji Tianyu, so he stayed by her side, suppressing his yawns as he played chess with her and talked to her. He told himself that Ji Tianyu was the girl he had been searching for, and that he could not let her suffer any pain. He had to slowly grow up with her, and then marry her. Only then could he be considered complete. But when he was by Ji Tianyu's side, he faintly felt dull and bored. He was very fond of playing chess, and could concentrate fully every time he played. But when he played chess with Ji Tianyu, he could not raise his spirits. Her chess skills were too weak, like soft tofu that could not be played. The first time he was distracted while playing chess, he was thinking about Ji Xinyu's injuries. So when it was time to treat Ji Xinyu's injuries, he immediately bid farewell, and returned to his courtyard. When the servants in the courtyard told him that Ji Xinyu had come to find him, his heart inexplicably skipped a beat. Then he went to Ji Xinyu's courtyard, but he did not expect that she had already decisively left. When he saw the letter and heard South Heaven Emperor's self-defense, his heart felt like it was being fiercely clenched by someone, and some indescribable pain and anger surged up. From Ji Xinyu's drunken reaction, he clearly knew how much this strong girl yearned for kinship. This girl had worked hard enough, but she had always been treated unfairly. And the reason why she had been treated unfairly was mostly because he had run away from the marriage back then. Under such injustice, she actually didn't grow crooked, didn't become cynical, and didn't become a devil. Instead, she became a hero of a generation. It was really admirable. Such a girl should be treated with sincerity and deserve the best. He knew that she would definitely rush to the marriage pillar in the next few days, but he was afraid that she would use the flight spell regardless. The flight technique was a relatively advanced technique, and her injuries were already worsening. If she used the flight technique again, she was afraid that it would cause irreversible damage to her body. It might not have much effect on her martial arts, but the scars on her body and those strange scales would never disappear. Although he had already told her about the importance of this relationship, this girl obviously didn't care much about it. Otherwise, she wouldn't have broken her vow time and time again. In this world, if Yu Tianlong claimed to be second in terms of her ability to find people, no one would dare to claim to be first. Once he opened his heavenly eye, he could search every nook and cranny of the entire Fanning continent. Back then, he had even used this method to help Shenjili find Ning Xuema. Chapter 27-28. If not for the fact that Ning Xuema had been forced by Shui Elan to disguise herself, he would have been able to find her. However, opening the heavenly eye consumed a lot of willpower. Opening it once consumed more than half of his willpower, and he would need to cultivate for a year to recover it. Therefore, he did not use this method often. He had only used it twice since he learned it. This time, in order to find Ji Xinyu, he opened it again. The result was disappointing. He did not find anything. There were only two reasons for this situation. First, she had changed her appearance and her aura. Second, she was hiding in some ancient enchantment, and this enchantment had the ability to block everything. Among the people Rong Yuishenlin knew, only Shenjuli knew such an abnormal enchantment. Shenjuli was probably fishing with Ning Xuema on his Xiaorao Island, so he probably did not have the time to come to this world to join in the fun. Therefore, the second possibility was eliminated, and only the first was left. It seemed like this girl was very familiar with Che Qingjia's transformation. Furthermore, this transformation of her aura was a relatively advanced spell. She really didn't care about her body at all. Rong Yuishenlin was angry, but he had no other choice. Opening the heavenly eye consumed more than half of his willpower, and he could not even summon the strength to ride the cloud. He could only rest for the time being and recover his willpower first. The best and fastest way to recover his willpower was to find a secluded place to clear all distracting thoughts and meditate. He was not willing to go to Nantian Palace now, because there were still a lot of troublesome things waiting for him there, and he might not be able to calm down. After thinking about it, he thought of Moon Admiring Peak. This place was not ordinary secluded, and no one would come to disturb him. The spiritual chi was abundant, and it was a good place to meditate. Of course, to be safe, he still called someone over. That person had not arrived yet, so he temporarily drank a little wine here. The moon in the sky was as big as a disk, and the moon was bright while the stars were dim. The moonlight of the 16th century was picturesque. Rong Yu Tianlan drank a mouthful of wine while facing the moon. Ji Xinyu's figure flashed across her mind, and the memories of her drinking and chatting with her last night flashed across her mind. Her heart shook slightly. Other than Shen Juli, this was the first time he had met such a bosom friend. If it wasn't for this marriage contract, he and she might have become best friends, right? He didn't know why, but when he thought about his best friend, he thought about Yunqi. Yunqi was his only confidant on the Tianxi continent. Of course, in his heart, he automatically ignored the gender of this confidant. His feelings for Yunqi were slightly weaker than his feelings for Shinjuli, but he still treated her as a good friend. However, they were only good friends. He never had any other thoughts about Yunqi. However, he vaguely felt that Ji Xinyue's position in his heart was different from Yunqi's. But he couldn't tell what the difference was. Perhaps it was because she used to be his fiancée in name, so there was a strange feeling in her heart. Just as he was pondering, there was a slight breeze in the distance, and a person floated down. Eighth cousin brother. It was Rong Yu Tianhuan. Rong Yu Tianlan raised his cup at him. Come and sit. Rong Yu Tianhuan did not stand on ceremony and sat across from him. Chapter 27-29. Rong Juishan Huan didn't stand on ceremony and sat opposite him. Looking at the wine gourd in his hand, his eyes lit up. Eighth cousin, what good wine is this? I want to drink too. Rong Juishan Lan said. Bring your cup over. Rong Juishan Huan scratched his head. Eighth cousin, I've never liked to bring those odds and ends. Alas, it's a pity that Xinyu isn't here. Otherwise he would have prepared a cup for me. He stared at the wine gourd again. Aren't you also drinking from the bottle? Bring it over, and let me drink a few mouthfuls. His handsome face showed a rare melancholy. I feel that there's some fire in my heart. I need to use wine to quench it. Rong Juishan Lan looked up at him and showed a rare concern. What's the fire in your heart? Rong Juishan Huan looked at him like a searchlight. You sent Xinyu off last night. Why didn't you come up? You two. What happened? Rong Juishan Lan frowned slightly and asked calmly. What can happen between him and me? He looked righteous, and obviously didn't do anything bad. Rong Juishan Huan scratched his head again, and felt that he was thinking too much. He muttered this. Then why didn't you come back? The little princess you brought is really noisy. She kept crying, and even hurt her own leg just to let you hug her. In the end, you didn't come back. The little girl was so wrong that she cried. Rong Juishan Lan raised his eyebrows. She hurt her own leg. Of course. Did you think I was the one who kowtowed to her? I'm not interested in this kind of little flower. Right, eighth cousin. I think the little girl should have fallen in love with you. You're also very good to her. Are you guys? Hee. Rong Juishan Huan's last hee sounded a little wretched. Rong Juishan Lan glanced at him and didn't comment on his question. He only said one sentence. She's still an underage little girl. Well, it was too early to talk about this. Rong Juishan Huan put this matter aside for the time being. He looked up at the moon in the sky and suddenly sighed. Eighth cousin, I found that I've fallen in love. Rong Juishan Lan knew that this cousin had always been dissolute. It wasn't strange for him to say this. Which girl did you fancy this time? Rong Yuetian Huan shook his head and said with a sad face. It's not a girl this time. Rong Yuetian raised her eyebrows and looked at him, waiting for him to continue. In the end he said an earth-shattering sentence. I'm I'm probably a homosexual. I like a man and can't forget him for a moment. Rong Yuetian's heart skipped a beat. She could vaguely guess who he liked. Who is that man? Shenyu. Rong Yuetian Huan spat out these two words. The wine gourd in Rong Yuishenlin's hand fell to the ground. Rong Yuetian Huan was quick to react. He caught the wine gourd and said dejectedly, "You're also surprised, right? Sigh. Even I am surprised by this. But this is the truth. Every time I see him, my heart beats wildly, and I want to treat him well. Sometimes I even want to hug him. Seeing him is not the normal kind of nervousness, but every time I see him, I long to see him again. I didn't have this kind of feeling towards the beauties I admired before. Do you think I have fallen in love? At that time, I wasn't sure myself. Because of this, I specially went to find those beautiful women and wanted to take them with me to admire the moon. However, those women who had moved my heart before, I no longer had the same feelings with them as before." Chapter 27:30. Rong Yuetianhuan cried miserably. "Eighth cousin, look, I'm gay, right? If my father knew about this, he would beat me to death." He raised his hand and drank a big mouthful of wine. "What should I do?" Rong Yuetianlan looked at him for a moment, then got up and said lightly, "You're not gay. You just lack women. Go back and find another woman. Don't think about that Shenyu. He's not suitable for you. If you reveal your thoughts, I don't know if your father will beat you to death, but Shenyu will definitely beat you to death. Your friendship will end here as well." Rong Yuetianhuan shivered. "Really?" Rong Yuetianlan said seriously, "Of course it can't be more real. Tianheng, repent and be saved. You're the only child in your family. If you're gay, your father will probably go crazy." Rong Yuetianhuan shivered again. This was really possible. After all, his father was a famous hot-tempered prince. He had a fiery temper and would explode at the slightest touch. He cried miserably and looked at his eighth cousin for help. "Then what should I do?" Rong Yuetianlan gave him a few words. "Salad. Repent and be saved." Rong Yuetianhuan lowered his head like a frosted eggplant. "If I listen to my father, I'll probably marry that Princess Ji Xinyu that you don't want." Rong Yuetianlan froze. The scene of Rong Yuetianhuan and Ji Xinyu bowing to heaven and earth flashed in his mind. He glanced at him coldly and said, "You don't match her. You don't have to think about this. Ji Xinyu was so outstanding. She must find an absolutely outstanding man to match her." Rong Yuetianlan went through all the candidates in his heart these 2 days, but he couldn't find a suitable candidate. He selfishly felt that no one could match such an outstanding girl. And Rong Yuetianhuan, this dandy, was even worse. Such a beautiful flower couldn't be stuck on cow dung. Rong Yuetianlan, who had always pursued perfection, felt unbearable when he thought of that scene. Rong Yuetianhuan wanted to say more, but was interrupted by Rong Yuetianlan. "Tianheng, I'll give you this gourd of wine, but you have to guard me for an entire day." Rong Yuetianhuan finally saw that Rong Yuetianlan's complexion wasn't too good. After drinking so much wine, his handsome face was still somewhat pale. "What's wrong with you?" Rong Yuetian patted his shoulder. "Don't let anything disturb me while I'm meditating. I'll leave my safety in your hands. Can you do it?" Rong Yuetian Hung was still very loyal, and immediately puffed out his chest. "Yes. Don't worry, with me as your protector, even if a dragon flies over, I can beat it away." Rong Yuetian sat in meditation. His posture when meditating was exceptionally free and easy, different from any other way of meditating in this world. A faint light flashed from his body. He sat in the light, like a phoenix young master undergoing nirvana. Rong Yushenhang squatted at the side and watched for a while. Suddenly he thought of a problem. He still hadn't asked whether that Princess Ji Shenyue was beautiful or not. Also, his cousin said that he was not compatible with the princess. Did he think that his cousin was outstanding, and the princess was not compatible with him? I didn't think that I had such an important position in my cousin's heart. In that instant, Rong Yu's Tianhuan reached perfection. Ji Xinyu didn't expect that her engagement with Rong Yue Tianlan would be so popular during the engagement, adding countless gossip topics to the continent and entertaining the public for 3,000 years. The cancellation of the engagement could also shock the people and make the whole world know about it. Chapter 2731. Princess Ji Xinyu of the Nantiang clan and Her Highness Rong Yu Tianlan of the Eastern Sky clan were going to break off their engagement in front of the Pillar of Marriage on the 24th day of the 28th year of the Fanning calendar. No one knew why this news spread, but it spread like a virus throughout the entire Fanning continent. Soon it spread to every corner. Not only did the officials and nobles of various clans know about this news, even the peddlers on the streets were spreading the news everywhere. People were guessing when these two people would arrive, and how they would arrive. Ji Xinyu's outstanding appearance at the palace banquet a few days ago had stunned many people. Naturally, these deeds of hers also spread throughout the Fanning continent. Everyone knew that she was originally a top beauty. Although she was wearing a veil at that time, everyone could already tell that she was a beauty, and a super beauty at that. The more veil she wore, the more it aroused people's curiosity. There were already people guessing her facial features based on the undulation of the veil. There were even busybodies who painted her according to the rumors. These portraits were naturally of a variety, but it aroused people's interest even more. They wanted to know what this princess looked like. Originally, this princess's whereabouts were unknown. No one knew her true appearance, and no one knew her whereabouts. Now people got the news that she was going to Misty Mountain to break off the engagement. This news was like a shot of chicken blood, igniting everyone's nerves. Countless people rushed to Misty Mountain to see this big show. Therefore, when Ji Xinyu came out of her peaceful little nest that day, her ears were filled with this news. People were discussing it when she was eating, people were discussing it when she was drinking tea, and even people were discussing it when she was on the road. Because there were many mysterious factors about her, and she was a typical example of a salted fish turning over a new leaf. People gossiped about her even more than Rong Yu Tianlan. Many people took those strange portraits and compared them everywhere, looking for her hidden among the common people, as if they were searching for a treasure. There were accurate rumors that this princess and Her Highness Rong Yu had broken off their relationship, and the two of them would come separately. At this time, people were guessing that this princess would appear at the foot of Misty Mountain in the most eye-catching manner. The scene must be amazingly beautiful. The princess was already a monarch god, so the most eye-catching appearance was to step on a cloud and slowly descend. Many people rushed to the Misty Mountain early in order to catch a glimpse of the peerless beauty of the princess. There were also some people who were on their way to the Misty Mountain. Some big sects that were good at scheming felt that this princess would definitely come from the sky, so they set up all kinds of hidden sentries in the sky, wanting to see her as soon as possible. There were also some people who thought that the princess would probably use the lost snow-treading divine skill, which was known as the traceless snow-treading divine skill. Therefore, every road leading to the Misty Mountain had been set up with secret sentries to secretly observe the figures that were flying past, an inescapable net. In order to watch the fun, they even set up an inescapable net. It could only be said that the people of the Fanning continent were actually very free. In order to get first-hand gossip, they were willing to go all out. There were still 5 days until the agreed date. Regardless of whether the princess wanted to travel by air or land, she should have already set off by now. Those spies began to become extremely nervous, as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Their eyes were like searchlights as they searched for the princess's figure. Chapter 2732. And at this moment, Ji Xinyu, who was supposed to be rushing along in a flashy fashion, was leisurely leaning against a carriage. The carriage was pulled by 4 wind-chasing leopards, running on the wide road. Its speed was no slower than anyone running with qinggong. This carriage was a common means of transportation for the commoners of the Fanning continent, who were slightly wealthy. More, faster, better, and more economical were its pronouns. Xinxia heroes were everywhere in this world. Those who had skills generally used flying, and those who couldn't use qinggong. Even if women's qinggong and flying skills were not good, those who were really rich had their own luxurious cars. When they really needed to go out, they wouldn't use a carriage. Therefore, Those who took the carriage were mostly commoners. Ji Xinyu's carriage was of the highest quality. It was very comfortable to sit in, and it was also the fastest among all the carriages. Most importantly, there were very few people in the carriage with her. There were only 3 people, 3 young heroes. These 3 young heroes probably didn't go out often, and had been in a state of excitement for the past few days. What they talked about the most was Ji Xinyu and Rongyue Tianlan breaking off the engagement. They made all kinds of guesses along the way. Did you see that? I saw a spy squatting on a tree at the corner. He was probably looking for Princess Ji Xinyu. These people are really stupid. Someone like Princess Ji Shen, you would definitely take the heavenly road. How could she run on land? It's useless to guard her. That's right. I heard that this princess is unparalleled in beauty. She can make people's souls fly away with just one look. I hope we can see her appear this time. Even if we can only see her from afar. I can die without regrets. If we get there early, we should be able to see her, right? After all, there are 2 ways to enter the Misty Mountain. She will definitely take one of them. We have to make this carriage run faster. Look, all the carriages along the way are running in the same direction. They must be going to see the show. If we get there late, I'm afraid we can't even squeeze through the mountain gate. We can't even see the princess shadow. Wouldn't it be a waste to run so far? That's right. Then let's make the carriage run faster. One of the youths went to urge the carriage owner outside. Ji Xinyu had been silently resting with her eyes closed. The attention of the 3 young heroes was focused on the outside of the carriage. From time to time, they would exclaim in surprise, saying that they saw a certain hero using his qing gong to fly past them. Occasionally, they would exclaim in surprise that they saw a certain expert flying past them in the sky. With so many people rushing to the front, the 3 people in the carriage became more and more impatient. From time to time, they urged the carriage owner to hurry up. After yelling for 2 days, the 3 young heroes were finally a little tired. They were undoubtedly well informed about the outside world, and the voice-transmitting talismans on their waists would occasionally transmit messages to their friends. From these telepathic messages, the 3 young heroes knew that no one had found the whereabouts of the princess, and no one had even seen the whereabouts of Rongyue Tianlan. There were still 2 days left before the appointed time. Logically speaking, the 2 of them should have set off no matter what. Now that the 2 of them had disappeared, could it be that the 2 of them had suddenly thought things through and did not want to break off the engagement? Had they been fooled? The 3 young heroes were speculating one after another, expressing all sorts of opinions. The 3 young heroes' voices were filled with fear of being tricked, and one of them finally noticed Ji Xinyu, who was napping in the corner. Chapter 2733. One of them finally noticed Ji Xinyu, who was napping in the corner, and couldn't help but ask, "Brother, what do you think is going on with this princess? Is she walking in the air or on land? Or is she using some kind of earth escape technique?" Ji Xinyu slowly opened her eyes and slowly said, "Maybe the princess is sitting in the carriage like all of you?" When she said this, the 3 young heroes looked at her angrily. How is that possible? How could the princess sit in the carriage? That's too uncool. Your guess is too ridiculous. Exactly. Even if the princess wants to sit in a carriage, she would definitely sit in the palace's wind-chasing carriage. Why would she lower herself to sit in a carriage? It's too ridiculous. Too ridiculous. Ji Xinyu touched her nose, didn't say anything else, and closed her eyes to rest. In the beginning, she had indeed used the flight technique, but not in the appearance of Ji Xinyu, but in the appearance of Xinyu. Naturally, no one would notice her flying in the air. She even met a few of her friends in the Jianghu, and exchanged a few words with them. After flying for a day and a half, she landed according to her plan. Originally, she wanted to use qing gong to fly, but she suddenly saw the most luxurious and she was also a little tired. So she just sat in the carriage. Along the way, she looked like she was resting with her eyes closed. But it was actually a kind of meditation, slowly recovering her strength between breaths. She calculated that with this carriage, she would have enough time to reach the foot of Misty Mountain. So she stayed in the carriage with peace of mind. Other than the 3 young heroes who were a little noisy, There was no other dissatisfaction. Of course, when she sat in the carriage, she didn't use the identity of Xinyu or Ji Xinyu, but an ordinary man's identity. Even her current appearance was very ordinary, the kind that you wouldn't be able to find if you threw her into a crowd. This kind of her naturally didn't attract the interest of the other young heroes. And they also didn't disturb her, letting her have a lot of peace and quiet. Her answer just now made the three of them thunderstruck, and they directly classified her as a stinky brat without any imagination, and didn't talk to her anymore. Ji Xinyu thought that she would arrive at her destination without any trouble. But she didn't expect to meet a robbery on such a short journey. The robber fell from the sky, and with a bang, he fell in front of the carriage, and was almost stepped on by a leopard pulling the carriage. Fortunately, the robber reacted quickly, and jumped onto the shaft of the carriage shouting, "Robbery!" That sound was like a clap of thunder, shaking the entire carriage. The coachman almost fell off the carriage. Ji Xinyu's eyes slightly open, and the other three young heroes in the same carriage all jumped up. The three young heroes were not afraid to die, and they were not afraid of trouble, and they all rushed out ready to fight. Outside the carriage, there were endless sounds of shouting and cursing. After a while the carriage the robber use, and use Xinyu's ates. T the yayas yu Xinyu's yuet. Use misty you no teat. You. After saying this, the robber kicked open the carriage's door, and prepared to stretch and enjoy himself in the carriage. Suddenly, he saw Ji Xinyu, and his eyes widened like copper bells. Fuck, there's actually another one here. Chapter 2734. He rolled up his sleeves and rushed over. Although the acupoints of the three youths were sealed, their mouths were not sealed. One of them was quite kind. Brother inside, don't fight with him. He's a monarch immortal, we're not his match. Before he could finish his words, a body flew out of the carriage and landed on the side of the road with a loud bang, creating a large pit and raising a cloud of dust high up into the air. The three youths couldn't bear to watch and closed their eyes. It's over. With such a big commotion, the youth who spoke like a madman was either dead or crippled. After they regained their freedom, they would first check on that person's injuries to see if he could be saved. One of the three young heroes was more hot-blooded. He closed his eyes and shouted, "If you want to rob the carriage, then just rob it. Why do you have to injure people? Do you think you can bully people just because you're a monarch immortal?" Before he could finish his words, he suddenly felt his body lighten. The acupoints that were sealed were unsealed. He was stunned and opened his eyes. Before he could react, a faint voice came from the carriage. "Do the three of you still want to ride the carriage?" It was the youth in the same carriage. The three young heroes jumped up from the ground and saw that the person lying in the pit by the roadside was the robber. The robber's face was purple, and he stared into the carriage hissing. He wanted to say something, but he couldn't say anything. The ordinary youth in the same carriage was actually an expert. The three young heroes were both happy and shocked. They patted the dirt off their bodies and jumped into the carriage. The carriage sped up again. The three young heroes looked at Ji Xinyu, who was resting with her eyes closed, their eyes filled with disbelief. He actually beat a monarch immortal off the carriage so easily. What was the background of this ordinary youth in front of them? "We've been traveling together for many days, but we still don't know your name. Can you tell us?" One of the young heroes started to speak in a genteel manner, and even flicked his sleeves. "Shin." Ji Xinyu spat out a word. "Hero Xinyu." One of them shouted. The other youth immediately retorted, "Brother, don't randomly identify people. Although this young hero's surname is Shun, he might not be Hero Xinyu." The brother also reacted. Although the three of them had never seen Xinyu before, they had heard of his deeds. They had heard that his appearance was quite handsome, and the youth in front of them could at most be considered delicate and pretty. That elder brother was very forthright. He laughed and said, "It doesn't matter. Even if it's not Hero Xinyu, it's still very powerful. Brother Shun, can we become friends?" Ji Xinyu smiled but did not answer. Instead, with a shake of her hand, she took out a chessboard. "Do any of you know how to play chess? Isn't it boring to travel such a long distance? Why don't we play a few rounds? In this continent, All men probably knew how to play chess, especially those young heroes of the Jianghu, who treated chess as a compulsory course to keep up appearances. And these three young heroes were all chess experts. One of the youths immediately lifted his clothes and sat opposite Ji Xinyu. I'll go first. In terms of martial arts, the three of them might not be a match for this young man surnamed Shun. But in terms of chess? Playing chess requires talent. These three young heroes came from a family of chess masters. Although their martial arts were not up to standard, their chess skills were top-notch. One of them was even known as a chess genius, and had never met a match since his debut. And the three brothers also happened to have the surname Qi. Ji Xinyu was too lazy to remember their names, so she called them first Young Master Qi, second Young Master Qi, third Young Master Qi. Chapter 2735. The Qi brothers' chess skills were reversed. Eldest young master was the worst, while third young master was the best. 2 hours later, first young master and second young master both lost with their faces covered in dirt. Third young master, who rarely played chess with others due to his status as the chess saint, finally couldn't help but play, sharpening his sword to regain his dignity. Third young master held on for a longer time. His face was red as he scratched his ears and cheeks for nearly an hour before he finally lost. Naturally, third young master was not convinced. It was chess, after all, one game couldn't determine the winner. Thus, when it was dark, third young master Qi lost 3 games in a row. Although the three Qi brothers had lost the game, their admiration for Ji Xinyu was like a rising tide, endless and unending. The three Qi brothers realized that although this young Master Shin looked ordinary, he had a very special temperament that made them want to get close to him, but not dare to be rash. What was even rarer was that this young Master Shun was very forthright and knew a lot of things. He was an expert in rock, paper, scissors, wine tasting and chess, so he got along well with them. By dinner time, the three Qi brothers were already so familiar with her that there was no distinction between you and me. When there was wine, everyone drank it, and when there was food, everyone tasted it. They also called her Young Master Shun, instead of Young Master Shun. Because this place was not far from Misty Mountain, the three brothers calculated that they would arrive at the foot of the mountain at sunset tomorrow. Since there was plenty of time, the three brothers were not in a hurry. They discussed with Ji Xinyu and found an inn to stay for the night. It wouldn't be too late to get up early tomorrow morning. Ji Xinyu naturally agreed. She also needed to save her energy. There was still a tough battle to fight on the mountain tomorrow. The 4 of them found an inn. The third brother of the 3 brothers wanted to practice chess with her and wanted to sleep with her, but she directly rejected him. So the 3 brothers shared one room and Ji Xinyu another. After dinner, the 4 of them returned to their rooms. Ji Xinyu was about to go to bed to practice when there was a knock on the door. She opened the door and saw that it was third young Master Qi. Young Master Shen, do you want to play another game? Third young Master Qi showed her the chessboard. It was rare for him to meet an opponent, so he was itching to play. Ji Xinyu also felt that it was not good for the body to cultivate right after eating, so she agreed. The 2 of them played a game in the room. It could not be denied that third young Master Qi was a genius in this aspect. After playing a few games with Ji Xinyu, he gradually grasped her methods and knack for playing chess. It would not be as easy for Ji Xinyu to win against him as it was in the beginning. The 2 of them played this game for a full 2 hours before the outcome was decided. Ji Xinyu won this game by 2 pieces. Third young Master Qi was not satisfied with his loss and wanted to play another round. Ji Xinyu yawned and said, I want to rest early tonight. Let's play a few more rounds in the car tomorrow. Third young Master Qi couldn't force her and could only give up. However, he made an agreement with Ji Xinyu. Boss Shen, let's make a deal. Tomorrow, we'll kill to our heart's content. Ji Xinyu nodded. The time in the carriage was boring, and killing a few rounds could also train her thinking. It was rare to meet such a national-level opponent, so she nodded in agreement. Only then did third young Master Qi leave. Before he left, he suddenly said, Boss Shen, I feel a little strange tonight. It's like there's a pair of eyes staring at me from behind. It's making my hair stand on end. Do you have the same feeling? Ji Shinhua glanced at him. Was this brat trying to scare her? It seemed like he hadn't given up on his desire to sleep with her. So she smiled and suddenly stared at third young Master Chi's back. What's behind you? Chapter 2736. Third young Master Chi was so scared that his hair stood on end. He screamed and threw himself at Ji Shinhua. Ji Shinhua did not expect him to be so timid. She blocked him and knocked him down. Hey, you're too timid. Third young Master Chi almost hugged her leg. He trembled and said, I'm scared of ghosts the most. Behind, what's that? Ji Shinhua sighed. Just a cockroach. Third young Master Chi was speechless. He got up with cold sweat. After this scare, he no longer had any interest in playing chess. He took the chessboard and left. Ji Shinhua shook her head. She did not feel anything strange, nor did she feel that someone was watching her. With her makeup, even if her biological parents came, they would not be able to recognize her. Naturally, no one would be watching her. She closed the door, washed up, and went to bed. She closed her eyes and slowly immersed herself in cultivation. There was no moon tonight. Only stars filled the sky. On the dark roof of the inn, a person sat alone. The autumn wind was cold, and the autumn wind was cold. A red pot and a red stove were slowly brewing tea. This person was actually brewing tea in this kind of place. He was not an ordinary person. This person was obviously an expert in kung fu tea. His movements were as smooth as flowing water. After a while, the aroma of tea rose in spirals. That person seemed to be absent-minded tonight. The tea he brewed did not seem to be at the right temperature. After taking a sip, he put down the cup. He simply lay on the roof and rested his head on his hands to think. There was a breeze below, and a young master in black flew up. The young master who brewed tea was disturbed. He was a little unhappy, but he did not get up. He only supported his head with one arm and glanced at the young master in black. The young master in black had good martial arts. When he landed on the roof, he was like a falling leaf, not making a sound. The young master in black had a rare handsome appearance. After he jumped on the roof, he looked around. The young master in black was sitting lazily in front of him, but he did not seem to see him. After looking around the roof, he frowned and whispered, "Strange, there's no one here. Why do I feel like there's someone up there?" His nose twitched slightly, and he was even more surprised. Did I smell wrong? I can actually smell the aroma of tea here. He turned his head and looked around, but he still didn't see anything. The faint fragrance of the tea seeped into one's heart and mind. The young master in black couldn't help but take a few more whiffs. It was late at night, and the cold wind blowing on the roof was quite chilly. The black-clothed man shook his head slightly. I'm probably being paranoid. Who would come up to the roof to make tea in this kind of weather? This tea aroma is probably coming from the other guests' rooms. It's not convenient to disturb them at this time. The young master tea maker lazily propped up his head and looked at him, muttering to himself. He had no intention of paying attention to him. This place was close to the Misty Mountain. Due to the large number of people who came to watch the fun, the originally deserted inn was a little overcrowded. There were all kinds of people, and there was no lack of experts among them. For example, this black-robed young master should have reached the level of monarch god. Just as the black-clothed young master was about to jump down from the roof, his vision suddenly darkened. Ji Shinhua's figure flashed and landed on the roof. A slender sword in her hand pointed at the black-clothed young master's forehead. "Sir, what are you trying to do by peeping here?" The black-clothed young master used several movement techniques in succession, but he still couldn't avoid the sword in Ji Shinhua's hand. Surprise appeared in his eyes. "You are?" Ji Shinhua's current appearance was that of an ordinary person, but her movement techniques were not ordinary at all. Chapter 2737. The black-clothed man was quite knowledgeable, and he knew almost all the masters in the world. But Ji Shinhua was so unfamiliar. He had never seen her before. "Don't worry about who I am." Ji Shinhua was impatient. "What are you trying to do by peeping here?" The black-clothed man smiled bitterly. "I came up because I thought there was someone hiding up there. But I didn't expect it to be empty. I was about to go down when I bumped into you. He looked at Ji Xinyu again. I see that your skills are extraordinary. Would you like to go down and let me treat you to a drink? He wanted to make friends. Ji Xinyu came up to catch the peeping Tom, not to make friends. Besides, she also recognized who this person was. He was the only son of the West Sky Emperor, known as the Jade-Faced Azura, Shi Shuangqing. This person liked to make friends very much. He knew all the masters in the Sanning continent. He had a wide circle of friends, comparable to Rongyue Tianlan in the past. Ji Xinyu only wanted to keep a low profile, and didn't want to use this ordinary identity to make friends, so she coldly refused. No need. She turned and flew down from the roof. Curiosity flashed through the black-clothed man's eyes. He pondered for a moment, shook his head, and suddenly smiled. He jumped down from the roof and returned to his room. The young master who was brewing tea had been watching in silence, but he didn't make any movements. There was a barrier around him. If he didn't want anyone to see him, no one could see him, unless it was someone of a higher level than him. But was there anyone in this world who was of a higher level than him? He stood on the roof for a while, and drank a few cups of tea before floating down. But this time, he appeared directly in Ji Xinyu's room. After Ji Xinyu returned to her room, she sat for a while, but she didn't know why she was a little irritated. She got out of bed and moved a little. She opened the window, and a faint tea fragrance floated in from outside. Strangely enough, this matcha fragrance actually calmed her slightly agitated heart down. Tea was supposed to be refreshing, but this tea fragrance had a calming effect. After her irritated heart calmed down, she gradually felt sleepy and simply went to bed. She often had insomnia, but this time she fell asleep with her pillow. In a daze, she seemed to feel that someone had sat beside her and pulled up her loose sleeves. She was an alert person. When she felt that something was wrong, she subconsciously wanted to open her eyes. However, she was probably too sleepy. Her eyelids seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds, and she could not lift them at all. Feeling anxious, he fell into a deeper slumber. This time, she seemed to have had a very deep dream. In the dream, she was an innocent and cute little princess who was deeply loved by her parents. The beginning of the dream was very sweet. She received the love of her parents that she had always longed for. She could also maintain that innocence. In her dream, she even fell in love with a man who could topple cities. This man treated her like a precious pearl and played with her hand. I want to marry you. You must come and marry me. Ji Xinyu, who was in deep sleep, suddenly muttered these words. The man who was sitting by her bedside and applying ointment on her wound suddenly paused and looked down at her. She was sleeping very soundly. Her eyebrows were arched, and the corners of her lips were curved. It was unknown what kind of sweet dream she was having, but she seemed to be very happy. The man looked at her for a moment and whispered, "Who do you want to marry you? Who do you like?" His voice was magnetic and gentle. In the dark night, there was a hint of seduction. The smile on Ji Xinyu's lips suddenly disappeared. Chapter 2738. The smile on Ji Xinyu's lips suddenly disappeared. Her body stiffened, and her lips were tightly pursed, revealing a pained and sorrowful expression. Why? 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 The man. He couldn't help but hold her hand and said in a low voice, "What do you mean, why?" Ji Xinyu was clearly in a nightmare. Her body struggled. "Let go of me, you bastard. Let go of me. I hate you. I hate you." She was struggling too hard, and her emotions were fluctuating too much. Her hands and feet were writhing as if she was drowning. Her current state was obviously not conducive to healing. The man frowned slightly and steeled his heart. He pressed his palm directly on a certain acupuncture point on her chest. A faint blue light was emitted from his palm and entered her body. This light clearly had a calming effect. Ji Xinyu, who was struggling painfully, finally calmed down. Her small mouth opened and closed a few times, as if she wanted to say 3 words, but no sound came out. A large teardrop rolled down from the corner of her eye. The man looked at her mouth and thought for a moment, and vaguely spelled out "yi." But he didn't know if it was "yi yi yi yi." This was too hard to guess. She could have called out a person's name, or said a place name. or even the beginning of a sentence. The man raised his head and rubbed between his eyebrows. He felt like he was crazy, guessing the words of a girl in her sleep. He was so bored. He shook his head, and the blue light under his palm became brighter. Her eyebrows finally relaxed. It was clear that she had broken free from that nightmare and had truly fallen into a sweet dream. And after he used this technique, he unintentionally forced her to reveal her original body. At this moment, the graceful girl was lying on the bed. Her beautiful eyes were closed. Her breathing was slow, and her chest was rising and falling slightly. The man's palm was still on her chest, right in the middle of her twin peaks. The man's fingers stiffened, and he quickly withdrew his hand as if it was burned. He sat there calmly for a moment, then raised his hand and rubbed between his eyebrows, feeling a bit strange today. He was a godly doctor, and if there weren't 10,000 people under his command, there were at least 8,000, and among them, there were naturally women. When he treated people, he only had eyes for the patient. No matter how beautiful they were just a human body that needed to be treated. And he didn't even think about whether the person was a man or a woman. But now he truly felt that the other person was a woman that moved his heart. His gaze fell on the scars on her arm. He shook his head again. Originally, he had treated her for 3 or 4 days, and the scales and scars had decreased a lot. However, she obviously didn't listen to him and frequently used magic, which made these things worse. Originally, the scales weren't very obvious, but now they were like fish scales. Each and every one of them was very distinct. Once they could open and close like fish scales, treating them would be harder than ascending to the heavens. I can't let her use any more advanced spells. However, she was still disobedient. The man thought for a moment and flicked his finger. Rays of blue light intertwined in the air and landed on her body. She seemed to be lying in the starry sky. She was extraordinarily beautiful. When the blue light fell, Ji Xinyu's body trembled slightly. Her face turned red for a moment before returning to normal. She did not wake up, and was still sleeping soundly. Only then did the man let out a sigh of relief. With a wave of his sleeve, Ji Xinyu returned to the appearance of an ordinary young man, lying there without any abnormalities. Chapter 2739. The next day, Ji Xinyue woke up feeling refreshed. She felt that sleeping was even more effective than meditating. She felt so relaxed that she felt like she was floating. She rubbed her temples, faintly feeling like she had a rather sad dream. However, the scene in the dream was too hazy, and she couldn't remember anything even after thinking about it for a long time. She had never paid much attention to this dream. Since she couldn't remember it, she might as well not think about it. She walked out of the door in high spirits, only to see third young Master Qi running out with a sallow face. "Boss Shun, we can't go with you. Little brother." Little brother's stomach isn't feeling well. Before he could finish his sentence, his expression changed. "Little brother, please excuse me." He ran toward the latrine like a wisp of smoke. Ji Xinyue. First young Master Qi and second young Master Qi also ran out of the room, their faces sullen. "Boss Shun, my third brother has had a stomachache since the middle of the night. He has been running non-stop for 18 times, and there are still no signs of it stopping. If you're in a hurry, we can let you have the carriage. What about you?" Ji Xinyue raised her eyebrows. "We will see how it goes first. If third brother can get better in time, we'll rush over. If we don't have a carriage, I'm afraid we won't make it in time. Unfortunately, there's no carriage to rent in this small town." First young Master Qi looked regretful, his fists clenched tightly in his sleeves. "I'll leave the carriage to you. I'll think of another way." Ji Xinyue left after saying that. Anyway, there were still a few hundred miles left. If it really didn't work, she could use the flight technique. She didn't want to fight with these 3 brothers for the carriage. She had just walked out of the inn when a luxurious black flying horse carriage stopped in front of her. She took 2 steps back and recognized the golden cloud pattern on the carriage as the symbol of the Western Sky Imperial family. The golden silk curtain lifted, and the black-robed Shi Shuangqing walked out. He smiled at Ji Xinyue. "Brother Shen, are you going to Misty Mountain? Why don't we go together?" Ji Xinyue raised her eyebrows. So the West Prince is also going to Misty Mountain. I heard that the West Prince doesn't care about worldly affairs. I didn't expect you to be interested in this. The Western Sky Imperial family was the furthest from Misty Mountain, a full 20,000 miles. The West Prince was also famous for not being interested in women. There were even rumors that he was a homosexual, and that he had countless male pets in the palace. Could it be that the reason he went to Misty Mountain this time was because he had taken a fancy to Rong Yuetian? However, with Rong Yuetianlan's character, if they wanted to make him gay, she was afraid that he would directly ask someone to break his arm. Shi Shuangqing said, I'm interested in those two people. Here it comes. She was right. Shi Shuang City was interested in Rong Yuetianlan. The reason why he added her, Ji Xinyu, was probably to deceive others. Ji Xin, you could almost see Shi Shuangqing confessing to Rong Yuetianlan in a domineering manner, only to be KA'd by Rong Yuetianlan. Ji Xinyu felt that since she had such a relationship with Shi Shuangqing, she had to remind him. I heard that Her Highness Rong Yu has another sweetheart. I know that Prince Rong Yue likes the South Heaven Emperor's youngest daughter. I heard that they came together this time. Xishuang City's news was even more accurate than hers. Ji Xinyue. Her first reaction was that the whole world knew about Rong Yue Tianlan and Ji Tianyue's love. His second reaction was that the West Prince had come all the way here just to watch the show. Chapter 2740. Ji Shenyue expressed her admiration and gave him a thumbs up. West Prince, you're so obsessed with exciting things. Shi Shuangqing stroked the jade thumb ring on his finger. Actually, I'm interested in Princess Ji Shenyue. Ji Shenyue tripped on a rock, and Shi Shuangqing hurriedly helped her up. Brother Shen? Ji Shenyue tried to hold back, but she couldn't. She blurted out, Isn't West Prince gay? Shi Shuangqing. He almost slapped her. His handsome face was a mix of green and white. Benwang likes women, how am I cut sleeve? Who dares to twist my words like that? Ji Shenyue thought to herself, that's how the people of the pugilistic world spread it. Not just one person. Looks like this West Prince was also wronged by the rumors. Also, this prince was protected too well by his subordinates, so it was normal for him to have never heard of such rumors. Ji Xinyu had a feeling that they were both people who had fallen into the same predicament. However, she was still a little curious. The world avoids this Princess Ji Xinyu like the plague. Why would your highness? Shi Shuangqing sized Ji Xinyu up and said, Brother Shen, have you heard the latest rumors about Princess Ji Xinyu in the pugilistic world? What rumors? This princess finally showed her true self at the Nantian Palace's banquet. It's said that her beauty is enough to topple cities, and she defeated Chang Bubi single-handedly. She's a rare heroine. Now all the unmarried princes of the various clans want to see this princess's true face, and many of them are interested in her. Just this time, the princes of the Western Sky, Eastern Sky, and Northern Sky have all moved out. I heard that the East Sky Emperor is rubbing his hands together to propose marriage to Princess Ji Shenyue for his youngest son. Shi Shuangqing told her all the gossip he knew. Ji Shenyue's lips twitched. The East Sky Emperor didn't have many good points, but there was one thing that was indisputable. He was good at giving birth. 3,000 years ago, Rong Yue Tianlan was his youngest son. 3,000 years later, he gave Rong Yue Tianlan 3 more younger brothers. His eldest and second younger brothers were probably afraid that if Rong Yue Tianlan didn't come back, Ji Xinyu would be forced to marry them. Therefore, as soon as they came of age, they hurriedly arranged a marriage for a daughter. Only the youngest brother was unmarried. Because he was only 1 year old, he was still drooling and wearing diapers. She was already over 3,300 years old this year. How could she bear to eat such tender grass? Had the East Sky Emperor's head been clamped by a door? Just as Ji Shenyue was cursing in her heart, Shi Shuangqing had already extended his hand to her. Brother Shen, let's get in the car first. We can talk on the way. Ji Xinyu pondered for a moment. The West Prince's carriage was naturally much faster than the post's carriage. If she sat in his carriage, it would save her the trouble of using her flight technique. However, once they reached the place, her identity would be exposed sooner or later. If someone saw her riding the same carriage as the West Prince, who knew what kind of rumors would spread? She hesitated for a moment. Suddenly, there was the sound of a whip not far behind her. A carriage stopped in front of the inn. Two people came out of the carriage. It seemed that their destination was here. As soon as they got out of the carriage, they paid the driver, who was wearing a bamboo hat. After paying, they turned around and entered the inn. Ji Xinyue's heart skipped a beat. Wasn't this a ready-made carriage delivered right to her doorstep? She watched as the driver waved his whip and was about to turn around and leave. Ji Xinyue said to the West Prince, "My apologies, I have other things to do, so I won't delay your highness' journey." Chapter 2741. Without waiting for Zishuangqing to speak, she flashed in front of the empty carriage and said, "I'll rent your carriage for one more day. The price is negotiable." As a princess, money was the last thing she lacked. She was afraid that the cart owner would get angry on the spur of the moment. She couldn't refuse him, because he was too rich. She directly took out a large ingot of gold from a brocade bag and threw it into his cart. "This is the deposit. If you send me to my destination, there will be another reward." The carriage owner was a sensible person. He asked in a low voice, "Where are we going?" "At the foot of the misty mountain." "Get on." The carriage owner flicked the whip in his hand, and the tip of the whip flew out and lifted the curtain. He waited for Ji Xinyue to enter. Ji Xinyue's eyes lit up when she saw this. She didn't expect the carriage owner to be a master. Judging by his skills, he should be almost at the level of an immortal. Ji Xinyue was bold and powerful, so she wasn't afraid of the carriage owner's tricks. She entered the carriage directly. On the other side, Shuangcheng was a little reluctant to give up. He simply ordered his carriage to block the road. Seeing the post carriage rushing over, his attendant stretched out his arm to stop it. "Young Master Shen, our prince still has something to say." Before he could finish, the carriage owner didn't move, and the carriage didn't slow down. Just as it was about to hit the carriage owner suddenly lashed out with the whip in his hand. There was a soft swoosh. No one saw the whip at all. The four Pegasus pulling the West Prince's carriage shuddered and swerved to the side of the road. The carriage whizzed away, but Zishuangqing's carriage almost rushed into the paddy field by the roadside. Zishuangqing was stunned. He didn't expect a carriage driver to have such powerful skills. He didn't even see how the other party lashed out with the whip. Ji Xinyue, who was in the carriage, didn't see this. She hadn't even sat down properly when the carriage rushed out. When she steadied herself and unintentionally lifted the curtain to look outside, the three-story inn was only a small black dot. The leopard driving the carriage was a 1,000-mile leopard, right? It was so fast. Ji Xinyue had never seen a leopard driving a carriage run so fast. She curiously lifted the curtains to look outside, but was sucked in a mouthful of cold wind. When the speed reached the extreme, even if there was no wind, one could still feel the wind. Ji Xinyue felt that the wind blowing over was like a hurricane. She pulled down the curtain and sat back in the carriage. Looking out the window, she could only see the trees on both sides moving backwards in a straight line. This speed, even the flight technique was just SOSO, right? Who would have thought that she would unintentionally pick up a treasure? The carriage was indeed heading in the direction of the misty mountain. Ji Xinyue leaned against the window and looked at the scenery outside for a while. She was a little bored, so she looked inside the carriage. His heart skipped a beat. The design of the carriage was extraordinarily exquisite. The carriage didn't look big, and the interior wasn't luxurious. However, every table and every stool was placed in the right place. It couldn't be more appropriate. It was extremely comfortable to sit inside. What was even rarer was that there were some hidden doors in the carriage. For example, if she pressed here, a drawer would pop out. There were exquisite snacks in the drawer. If she pressed there again, a small table would flip out. There were teapots and cups on the table. The tea in the teapot was slightly hot, just right for drinking. These things should be prepared for the passengers, right? Chapter 2742. He really couldn't be more considerate. Ji Xinyue suddenly felt that her gold ingot was worth it. She thought for a moment, then opened the curtain to discuss with the cart owner, who was driving the cart in the cold wind. Boss, after you send me to the place, can you wait for me at the foot of the mountain for 4 days? I can directly give you 10 times the price. In the cold wind, the cart owner didn't even turn his head, he only replied, okay. Although the cart owner didn't like to talk much, he was very easy to talk to. Ji Xinyu was satisfied. She thought for a moment, then asked, can I eat the things in your cart? If you need to charge extra, I can give you an advance. No need, just eat it. The things in the cart were indeed for customers to use. She didn't guess wrong. Ji Xinyu deeply felt that this cart owner was very business-minded, and also very benevolent and honest. When he met a customer like her who didn't lack money, he didn't cheat or cheat. It was really commendable. Ji Xinyu had always been forthright towards this kind of person. The cold wind outside was bone-chilling. It wasn't easy for the cart owner to drive the cart outside. Ji Xinyu casually took out a gourd of wine and threw it to him. Come, drink a gourd to warm your body. The cart owner raised his hand and sniffed. 30-year-old green bamboo leaf, it tastes good. Opening the gourd, he poured it down like a whale drinking from a river, then gave Ji Xinyu a thumbs up. Good wine. She didn't expect the cart owner to be an expert in drinking. Sure enough, experts were among the people. This sentence was not wrong at all. She glanced at the person's appearance. It was an ordinary face, but his eyes were as clear as water, extremely spirited. It was rare to meet a good friend in drinking. Ji Xinyu was also interested. She took out several gourds of good wine from her storage space. The two of them didn't ask about each other's background. One inside the cart, the other outside the cart, they started drinking. Ji Xinyu didn't see wrong. This cart driver was indeed an expert in drinking. She almost threw a gourd at him, and he could guess the name of the wine with just a sniff. Even the age of the wine was exactly right. Ji Xinyu admired him so much that she couldn't help but exchange ideas with him. The cart driver didn't speak much, but every word he said hit the nail on the head. It was as if he had swept Ji Xinyu's itch, making her smile. In her life, she had seen two experts in drinking. One was Rong's Tianlan. The other was the cart driver in front of her. When they were drinking, there was a moment when Ji Xinyu almost thought that the coachman was Rong Yuetian. But then she shook her head. Apart from being experts in wine tasting, the two of them did not overlap in other aspects. Rong, a person's man's son's he's, is he's t, tis ssb. He's is tis t, t. It is t t t. T's look, t's, sss of him. S therefore, the doubt in Ji Xinyu's heart only flashed for a moment before she threw it away. With a good friend, 1,000 cups were too little. The two of them drank and chatted, not feeling the loneliness of the journey. The cart driver's driving skills were extraordinary. Even though he was drinking, he drove very steadily. Ji Xinyu sat in the cart. The tea on the table didn't even spill. She actually wanted to get drunk, but when she thought of today's mission, she perked up. Young master, if you're tired, you can rest. I'll call you when we get there. There's a hangover ointment in the lower left corner of the cart. You can take a spoonful. Chapter 2743. If you're tired, you can rest for a while. I'll call you when we arrive. There's some hangover ointment in the lower left corner of the carriage. Just take a spoonful. The coachman turned around and stopped drinking with her. Ji Xinyu was familiar with the hidden doors and mechanisms in the carriage, so she quickly found the ointment. She thanked him and took a spoonful. It tasted good and had a hangover effect. Ji Xinyu was a little dizzy at first, but after taking the ointment, the dizziness disappeared completely. She leaned against the carriage and closed her eyes, wanting to take a short nap. She fell asleep after taking a short nap. In a daze, she seemed to feel someone sitting beside her and rolling up her sleeves. There was a faint coolness coming from the wound on her arm, and she seemed to smell a whiff of white plum. There were only two entrances to the misty mountain. One was the north side of the mountain, and the other was the south side. The north side of the mountain was steep, with the most evil beasts and demons, and miasma occasionally appeared. The south side of the mountain was relatively easier to go. Therefore, almost all the men and women who came to renew their marriage went to the south side of the mountain. Only the masters of the masters and those who liked to stand out would go to the south side of the mountain. This time, there were equally many onlookers at the Misty Mountain. Most of them thought that the masters of the masters like Rongyue Tianlan and Ji Xinyue might challenge the north side of the mountain, so that they could stand out. Of course, there were also some people who thought that the two of them didn't seem like masters who liked to look for trouble, so the possibility of them going to the south side of the mountain was higher. People with two different viewpoints couldn't convince each other, so they just looked at each other. Ji Xinyue was woken up by the noise outside. She opened her eyes and looked outside. The scene outside could only be described with one word: endless traffic, as lively as a gathering. The veins on Ji Xinyue's forehead throbbed. Although she was mentally prepared, she thought that there would be many people watching. She didn't expect there to be so many. Even the busiest streets in the city weren't as lively as here. The carriage she was in naturally slowed down and stopped at a crossroad. The coachman's voice came. "Master, are you going to the north or south side of the mountain?" "This is the north of the mountain." Ji Xinyu decisively lifted the curtain and said, "Let's go to Shannon." She didn't care where Rongyue Tianlan went. She was going to Shannon. She was here to break off the engagement, not to show off. She didn't want to waste any of her energy on acting tough. "Okay." The coachman agreed and drove the carriage to a fork in the road that led in another direction. Just as Ji Xinyue was about to put down the curtain, she suddenly heard a commotion coming from the north of the mountain. The carriage of the Nantian imperial family. "Look, it's the Nantian imperial family's carriage." It really is. Is Princess Ji Xinyue in the carriage? Maybe. No wonder I haven't seen her for the past few days. Looks like she's really in the car. A moment later, Ji Xinyue saw a golden carriage pulled by 8 fiery heavenly colts galloping over from the distance. Ji Xinyue was quite familiar with her family's carriage, and her gaze landed on the totem of a full moon on the roof of the carriage. The totem looked very noble. Below it was a blue sea, and above the sea, a bright moon rose. Whether it was the undulating waves of the sea or the bright moon, they were all depicted in detail and were extremely lifelike. Chapter 2744. Ji Xinyu recognized that it was Ji Tianyu's. This was Ji Tianyu's carriage. A few years ago, when she returned to the palace, the little girl even pulled her hand and showed off to her, saying that it was a birthday gift from her father. He even dragged her into the carriage and drove her around the palace. At that time, it was a coincidence that they met South Heaven Emperor. South Heaven Emperor saw that she was a little embarrassed in the carriage, and probably felt that he was too biased, so he quietly made a wish to her, saying that when she turned 3,500 years old, he would give her a luxurious carriage as well. At that time, she casually agreed and didn't say anything else. It wasn't the first time she was ignored in her life, and after so many times, she became numb to it. She didn't take South Heaven Emperor's promise to heart. Probably no one would have thought that she, Ji Xinyu, didn't have her own carriage in South Heaven Palace. She looked at the luxurious carriage with her head propped up, and understood that the person inside the carriage was the little sister she once doted on. She was so young, so she definitely didn't come by herself. Then who was accompanying her in the carriage? This carriage appeared in such a high-profile manner, so it naturally attracted the attention of most people. People were still guessing, but the main direction of their guesses was that this carriage belonged to Ji Xinyu, and they were all guessing where she was in the carriage. The pearl curtain swayed, and under the sunlight, there was a thin layer of light, so people couldn't see the situation inside the carriage. Many people stretched their necks to look inside, but they couldn't see anything. Suddenly, a slender hand appeared from the curtains. The 5 fingers were long, tender, and snow-white. Such a small hand was as transparent as a jade carving under the reflection of the pearl curtains. People held their breaths, and countless bright eyes stared at this hand. What a beautiful hand! However, this hand seemed a little small, and didn't seem to belong to an adult woman. Just as people were guessing, the bead curtain was lifted halfway, revealing half of a face that was as beautiful as a flower. The owner of that small face didn't seem to expect so many people to stare at her, and her snow-white face blushed slightly. She stuck out her tongue and hurriedly shrank back. The bead curtain swayed again, and the little beauty was no longer visible. Only the little girl's giggles could be heard from within the carriage. Brother Yu, there are so many people outside. Are they all here to see Xinyu Jiejian? So many people came for the annulment ceremony. Are you nervous? Her voice was sometimes high and sometimes low. Some words were enunciated clearly, while others were enunciated vaguely. However, almost all of the people outside were shrewd people. From these words, they had already guessed most of what had happened. The person on the carriage was the little princess of the South Heaven Emperor's family. Although the person on the same carriage as her didn't show himself, it should be the Eighth Highness without a doubt. Originally, people were skeptical about the rumor that Rongyue Tianlan had a special liking for little Princess Ji Tianyue, thinking that it was illogical. After all, the age difference between the two was too great. When Rongyue Tianlan and Ji Shenyue were engaged, Rongyue Tianlan had just reached adulthood, while Ji Shenyue was still an infant. One of the reasons why the Eighth Highness ran away from the marriage was that the other party was too young, and the two of them were not compatible. Now he had found an even smaller one. Furthermore, she was the younger sister of his current fiancé. People generally felt that it was impossible, so they just treated it as a rumor. Now it seemed that it was true. If the Eighth Highness came to the annulment ceremony with this little princess, wouldn't it be an official announcement to the world that he was interested in little Princess Ji Tianyue? Chapter 2745. But what would happen to his fiancée, Princess Ji Shenyue, by doing this? Although he wanted to break off the engagement, everyone thought that it was unkind of him to do so. Rongyue Tianlan came with the little princess. Then what about Princess Ji Shenyue? Where was she now? He wondered how embarrassed she would be if she were to see this scene. The luxurious carriage of the Southern Sky little princess drove towards the north of the mountain, leaving behind the sounds of discussion. Naturally, the crowd that was still hesitant about what to do followed the carriage. Ji Shenyue put down the curtain and said to the carriage owner outside, "Let's go." The carriage owner leaned against the carriage with his arms crossed. The discussion of those people naturally entered his ears. He was expressionless and just listened indifferently. He also glanced at the luxurious carriage, but no emotions could be seen in his eyes. Hearing Ji Shenyue's order, he suddenly smiled. "Are you still sure about going to the south of the mountain?" "Why not?" Ji Shenyue asked back. She also smiled. Her Highness Rongyue might like to be in the limelight, but that princess is not. I bet she just wants to break off the engagement quietly. She doesn't want to put on a show in front of anyone. The carriage driver was silent for a moment, then laughed again. "Okay, to the south of the mountain." The carriage started to move again. The southern foot of the misty mountain was near the sea. This place was obviously different from the north. The vegetation here was extremely lush, thick and light green, speckled with colorful stars. The trees here were obviously subtropical. Tall coconut trees were everywhere. Banyan trees with countless aerial roots each had a trunk that was thick enough for several people to wrap their arms around. The road to the entrance of the mountain was opened by people, because there were usually few people on this road. At this moment, there were already plants under the thick stone slabs on the road, making the huge stones on the road uneven. From time to time, there would be traces of all kinds of beasts on the road. At this moment, this road, which was usually very deserted, was full of carriages of all kinds. There were nobles, generals, ministers, high officials and nobles, as well as ordinary people. The closer they got to the entrance, the more crowded it was. On the trees, on the huge stones on the mountain peak, it was full of people. Ji Shenyue put the curtain on the carriage and rubbed her slightly swollen eyebrows. Just how bored were these people to come and watch the show? The car suddenly stopped, and the car owner's voice sounded. "The road ahead is already congested. Do you still want to go in?" Ji Shenyue thought for a moment, then lifted the curtain. "I'll get off now." She could go in by herself and reveal her identity to the guard at the entrance. When she raised her head, she saw the coachman looking at her with a faint smile. This expression was too familiar. Her heart skipped a beat. "You," the coachman smiled. "Why do you have to walk in yourself? You have to go in openly. Sit tight." Just as the word sit tight landed, Ji Xinyu felt the car suddenly shake. His vision suddenly blurred. When this carriage first appeared on this road, no one noticed it. After all, this carriage didn't look any different from other carriages. But now there were too many of these carriages on this road. At a glance, they could be seen everywhere. However, a five-colored light suddenly rose from the carriage. The five-colored light was extremely dazzling, attracting everyone's attention. Under everyone's gazes, the carriage underwent a shocking transformation. There were more in the morning. Dear friends, now is the double monthly ticket period. If everyone casts a ticket, Mumu will be counted as 2 tickets. At the end of the month, Mumu released another round of chapters. It's estimated that those who didn't have monthly tickets before will soon have monthly tickets. Everyone, you have to check your monthly ticket column every day and try to vote. Who knows, maybe one of your tickets will fly out. Haha. Chapter 2746. First of all, the carriage was the size of a small house, about 10 square meters. But now, it had suddenly expanded 5 or 6 times. It was the size of a small palace. Then there was the color. Originally, it looked like a green cloth carriage with no decorations on the body. But now, the body of the carriage looked like it was carved out of a large piece of white jade. The jade was transparent and shone with a soft white luster under the sun. There was a huge snow lotus embossed on the jade body. The snow lotus gradually turned red, and when the sun shone on it, the petals seemed to be stained with water droplets, sparkling like pearls. There were no other decorations on the carriage, except for this embossed sculpture. But there were only 2 words to describe it: low-key luxury. Not only had the carriage changed, but even the fire cloud leopard pulling it had also changed. It had a streamlined horse body, a crystal-like horn, ruby-like eyes, and snow-white wings. Someone exclaimed, "It's a winged unicorn! Heavens, it's a winged unicorn!" The winged unicorn was the rarest divine beast in the Fanning continent. When it flew, auspicious clouds would automatically revolve around it, and it could travel thousands of miles in an instant. Even if it ran like an ordinary beast, its speed was not comparable to ordinary beasts. It really ran like lightning. The fastest fire cloud leopard could only run more than 2,000 miles a day without eating or drinking. But this unicorn could run at least 20,000 miles a day. This kind of beast was already mystical and extremely rare. It was even harder to tame. It looked very handsome and delicate, but once it unleashed its power, it was not delicate at all. When it used all kinds of spells, it could cover the sky, thunder, and lightning. With a flap of its wings, it could easily flatten a mountain. Even if it was an evil dragon, it would dare to fight. This kind of beast was extremely arrogant and would not be controlled by anyone. It had never been heard of anyone taming it as a mount. When this kind of beast appeared, it would cause a sensation. Now, not only did it appear, but it had also become a horse pulling a carriage. And there were 2 of them. At this moment, the carriage driver standing in front of this incomparably eye-catching carriage had also changed his appearance. Originally, he was just a coarse and rough man, but now, he was a noble and peerlessly handsome young master. He wore a blue robe embroidered with aquatic plant patterns that almost dragged on the ground. His long black hair was draped over his shoulders, with only a light blue hairband at the back of his head. The rest of his hair flew like a waterfall. There was a mountain and river folding fan in his hand. The jade pendant on the folding fan made his slender fingers look even more translucent. He stood in front of the carriage, and there was an indescribable harmony between him and the carriage. Coupled with the green mountains and clear water behind him, it was like an ink landscape painting, and it was pleasing to the eye. The surrounding onlookers were stunned at first, and then they boiled over. Someone called out, "Rongyu, 8th Highness! It's 8th Highness Rongyu. It's really him. Why was he here? Didn't the rumor say that he went to the entrance of Shanbei? Could it be that he changed his mind and came to the southern entrance of the mountain? Who was in the car? Could it be that little Princess Ji Tianyue?" The discussions and guesses in the crowd were endless, but Rongyu Tianlan did not seem to hear these rumors. He swung the silver-blue long whip in his hand. The two-winged unicorn that had been pretending to be a fire cloud leopard for a day had long been suffocated. Now that they could finally show their true form and show their true abilities, they were naturally very happy. They raised their heads and let out a long hiss. Chapter 2747. It also frightened the horses and leopards pulling the carriages, causing them to tremble all over and fall to the ground with a series of thuds. People and horses were thrown off their feet. It was a mess. The winged unicorn seemed to be satisfied. It kicked its four hooves and pulled the luxurious carriage into the air. It leaped over the heads of the crowd in front and flew straight towards the entrance. The people behind were boiling. Countless people also followed and leaped into the air. They called their friends and chased after it with all their might. In fact, no matter where people went, they would be divided into different classes. Even the place where people were watching the show was no exception. The further in one went, the better the position. Those who could squeeze in were either high-ranking officials or powerful immortals and deities. The entrance to the mountain south was actually a ring-shaped valley. The valley was not big and could usually accommodate 200 to 300 people. At this moment, there were 400 to 500 people in this valley. And there were people outside who were constantly squeezing in. When Rongyue Tianlan appeared in the sky above the valley, it naturally caused an uproar below. The winged unicorns raised their heads and let out a long neigh. They flapped their wings, and a gust of wind blew out from between their wings, blowing directly towards the crowd below. After a moment, an empty space appeared in the middle of the valley that was so crowded that even a needle couldn't be inserted. The winged unicorn then pulled the carriage down and slowly landed on the empty space. Most of the people in this valley were the masters of the masters. So although they were blown away, they didn't lose their image. Countless pairs of eyes fell on the luxurious carriage. Rongyue Tianlan's appearance was not just eye-catching. It was an eye-opener for everyone. However, if he really wanted to show off, he should be sitting in the carriage, not standing in front of the carriage as a coachman. Moreover, looking at the whip in his hand, he was doing the work of a coachman. Then who was in the carriage? Who could make His Highness 8th Prince Rongyue be a carriage driver? Was it really the little princess? Was he so obsessed with the little princess? Countless pairs of bright eyes focused on the interior of the carriage after scanning Rongyue Tianlan. The carriage was translucent. Everyone could faintly see a figure inside. Rongyue Tianlan also turned to look inside the car. The corners of her lips curled up slightly, and she said in a gentle tone, "Come out, we're here." Inside the carriage, Ji Shenyue was actually a bit confused. She didn't expect that the person who had been her coachman for the whole day was actually Rongyue Tianlan. What was even more unexpected was that this car would transform from a sparrow into a phoenix. It was so eye-catching in an instant. What exactly was Rongyue Tianlan planning? She realized that her analytical mind was a little blank at this moment. She couldn't figure out what was going on in her head. She had come to break off the engagement with him. After breaking off the engagement, they would go their separate ways. When they met again, they would just be acquaintances. She thought that he must have thought the same and didn't want to have any more interactions with her. But he didn't expect him to play such a trick now. He had always been by his side. So who was the person in Ji Tianyue's car? Was it a misunderstanding? Or was it his little sister's doing? However, at this time, she didn't have time to think about it anymore. Because with Rongyue Tianlan's words, the door of the carriage opened. Ji Shenyue was naturally not afraid of meeting people. And there was nothing to be afraid of. She lifted the curtain at the front of the carriage and strode out. Chapter 2748. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. Everyone thought that there would be a charming little princess in the carriage, but they didn't expect an ordinary-looking young man to come out. If this young man stood in the crowd, he would be considered ordinary at most, but standing beside Rongyue Tianlan, he became a green leaf in contrast to this peerlessly handsome man. He could almost be described as ugly. No one expected such a situation, and many people's gazes turned to Rongyue Tianlan. They were all guessing whether this 8th Prince Rongyue was gay or not. Suddenly, someone in the crowd shouted, "Boss Shun!" Ji Shenyue's eyes turned, and saw the three Chi brothers in the crowd. She didn't expect the three brothers to be able to make it to this event. Brother Shen. So you're sitting in the 8th prince's carriage. This time, the one who spoke was the prince of Xishuang City. He looked at Ji Xinyue with a complicated gaze, probably thinking of him as Rongyue Tianlan's boy toy. This 8th prince exposed him in front of everyone with great fanfare. Was he trying to show that he was gay? Then was the matter between him and little Princess Ji Tianyue just a rumor? But just now, everyone saw little Princess Ji Tianyue sitting in the same carriage as him. Brother Rongyue. The crowd at the entrance of the valley was in a commotion, and then they parted like a tide, making a narrow path for one person to pass through, and little Princess Ji Tianyue ran in. She blinked her big eyes and said coquettishly, Brother Rongyue, so you're here. You said you had something to do. I've been looking for you for almost an hour. Her words were very artistic. She didn't say that she was in the same carriage as him. However, it also made people speculate that this 8th Prince Rongyu had just gotten off from Ji Tianyu's carriage, which was only an hour or so ago. This indirectly proved that the rumor was true, and not a rumor. Ji Tianyue's gaze fell on Ji Xinyue's face, her eyes full of curiosity. Brother Rongyue, you said you were going to get a big brother to be your helper. You were talking about him, right? Hello, big brother. I'm Ji Tianyue. Ji Tianyue gave Ji Xinyue a friendly smile. Ji Xinyue looked down at her, suddenly wanting to laugh. She really underestimated her little sister. She had always thought that this little sister of hers was as innocent and pure as a crystal, making her want to protect her. But it turned out that her heart was so deep, as expected of a child who grew up in the palace. Once her interests were involved, she could also be so calculative. She was an expert in palace politics. She crossed her arms and looked at Rongyue Tianlan, wanting to see what he would do and say. He had sacrificed a lot for Ji Tianyue, and doted on her a lot. Even if he knew that the child was lying, he wouldn't expose her. Would he? His little sister should also have the same idea, right? That was why she dared to say that in front of others. Once Rongyue Tianlan admitted it at this moment, it would be equivalent to indirectly admitting that there was an ambiguous relationship between him and little Tianyu. His marriage with this little princess would almost be set in stone. He couldn't possibly break off his elder sister's engagement, flirt with his younger sister, and then turn around and deny it, right? Her little sister was really good at this. It was too high. However, it should be in line with Rongyue Tianlan's thoughts, right? After all, he seemed to be interested in her, so he might just go with the flow. Then again, Rongyue Tianlan looked gentle and good-tempered, but she was extremely arrogant in her bones. Chapter 2749. Rongyue Tianlan looked gentle and had a good temper, but he was extremely arrogant. With his intelligence, he should be able to see through little Tianyu's thoughts. Was he willing to be schemed against by a little girl? What would he do? She crossed her arms and waited to see Rongyue Tianlan make a fool of himself. Rongyue Tianlan only nodded at Ji Tianyu. The smile on his handsome face was still very amiable. Tianyu, why are you here as a child? Your father is at ease to let you go out alone. Who came with you? Don't get separated from your companions. Do you understand? His words sounded very concerned, but it undoubtedly refuted Ji Tianyu's lies. Ji Tianyu's expression changed slightly. She was still a child after all. Meeting someone like Rongyue Tianlan who did not play by the rules, she was a little confused. Ji Xinyu was also a little surprised. What was Rongyue Tianlan planning? Was it a punishment for Ji Tian, you making up lies about him? Or was it an explanation for her? While she was thinking, Rongyue Tianlan's gaze fell on her. With a faint smile, he said leisurely, Xinyu, are you planning to go into the mountain dressed like this? His voice was neither loud nor soft, just like an ordinary person's, but it was very penetrating, and everyone in the valley heard it. Everyone. Those who were struck by lightning probably had the same expression. The second rumor said that the peerless beauty looked like this? Wasn't she too manly? The three Chi brothers opened their mouths wide, their faces full of shock and disbelief. The jade thumb ring in Shi Shuangqing's hand fell to the ground. Ji Tianyu's face was even paler, looking at Ji Xinyu. What? He is she. Rongyue Tianlan continued. Shenyu, do you want these people to misunderstand you? Why not show your true self? You can't use this appearance to break off the engagement with me, right? Ji Shenyu smiled gently. I'm just doing this for convenience. Now that I'm breaking off the engagement with you as the third princess of the Nantian clan, I naturally have to return to my original appearance. She casually turned around in the carriage, and after a faint seven-colored light flashed, the ordinary young man disappeared and was replaced by a beautiful young lady. She was dressed in a neat light green dress, and her black hair was casually tied into a bun. Her eyebrows were like distant mountains, her eyes were like cold stars, and her lips were as red as cherry blossoms. At this moment, her lips were slightly pursed, and the corners of her lips were slightly curved upwards, revealing her mesmerizing dimples. Beautiful. It was the kind of clear and bright beauty. Standing together with Rongyue Tianlan, he was actually not overshadowed by his brilliance at all. When the two of them stood together, it was as if pearls and jade were reflecting each other's brilliance. One couldn't help but think of a phrase, a perfect pair. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. Some people's mouths, which were originally half open, were now in an O shape. On the other hand, the three Chi brothers were so excited that their faces turned red. They were so excited that their hands were trembling. Heavens! They actually traveled together with this legendary princess for several days. Oh my god! As for Shi Shuangcheng, the jade thumb ring on the ground had already been picked up by his subordinates and carefully wiped clean. He unconsciously played with it, but his eyes flashed with a fiery passion as he looked at Ji Shenyu. Of course, when Ji Shenyu revealed her original appearance, the crowd was also in an uproar. There were all kinds of guesses, but after a while, one became the mainstream, and that was that some people suspected that she was not Princess Ji Shenyu, but was invited by someone to impersonate her. As for the purpose, it was unclear. Chapter 2750. It was probably to help the real Princess Ji Shenyu make a comeback, so that it would be easier for her to get married in the future. The most difficult thing in this world was to keep the mouths shut, and it was also difficult to interfere with other people's wild guesses. Someone who was more direct simply asked, "Is she really Princess Ji Shenyu?" "Yeah, it doesn't seem possible." The crowd was buzzing, some were agreeing, and some were refuting. Ji Shenyu was not interested in this game, where you had to prove that you were the real person. She had appeared in her real body, and using her real body to break off the engagement with Rongyue Tianlan was enough to show her sincerity. The other people's discussions. For someone like her who was in the vortex of gossip, these discussions were just fleeting clouds. Her figure rose, and she wanted to directly fly towards the entrance to complete the main task first. But just as she moved, her hand was grabbed by Rongyue Tianlan. So not only did she not fly up, she was brought a step closer to him, and almost heroically knocked him off the carriage. "Hey, you!" Ji Shenyu hurriedly steadied herself, narrowed her eyes, and looked at Rongyue Tianlan dangerously. The two of them were about to break off the engagement. What was the meaning of his sudden intimate action? She was about to take back her hand, but Rongyue Tianlan directly asked Ji Tianyu, who had been standing below in a daze. "Tianyu, who is she?" He had always been very kind to Ji Tianyu, and at this time, he did not say anything harsh. There was even a smile on his lips, but his eyes were faintly sharp. Ji Shenyu's heart skipped a beat. Rongyue Tianlan suddenly asked Ji Tianyu this. Was he also giving her a chance? A chance to turn over a new leaf? Perhaps Ji Tianyu's actions had really stepped on Rongyue Tianlan's bottom line. Ji Shenyu also slightly held her breath, wanting to hear how this sister she had always doted on would answer. And the other people's gazes were also focused on Ji Tianyu. If the girl in front of them was really Ji Shenyu, there was no reason why Ji Tianyu could not recognize her. So her words could be the final nail in the coffin, dispelling everyone's doubts. Ji Tianyu's little face had been pale, and at this moment, her small mouth was slightly open. She paused, her eyelashes trembling. Her small mouth opened and closed a few times, and finally said, "She is my sister Shenyu." A single word determined the fate of the universe. Ji Shenyu secretly let out a sigh of relief. She wasn't relieved because she had finally proven that she was Ji Shenyu, but because she felt that there was still some hope for her little sister. At the very least, she didn't choose to kick her when she was down. She didn't dote on her for nothing. Rong Yuishenlin glanced at Ji Tianyue. A hint of disappointment flashed through her eyes. Everyone knew that Rong Yue Tianlan stood aloof from worldly affairs and liked to live a free and easy life, but not many people really understood him. No matter how carefree he was, he had grown up in the palace after all. What kind of conspiracy had he not seen in this world? If Ji Tianyue wanted to play the palace intrigue in front of him, it was no different from showing off in front of Guan Yu. Ji Tianyue thought that she had no flaws, but in the eyes of Rong Yue Tianlan, there were flaws everywhere. Ji Tianyue purposely paused when she answered just now, and her eyes even rolled twice. Although she had proven that Ji Shenyu was her sister, if those actions fell into the eyes of people with ulterior motives, they would think that she was forced to admit it. This little girl played a good trick, and she didn't offend him, Rong Yue Tianlan, making him feel that she was still an innocent child. She could also make those old foxes suspicious, and even more suspicious of Ji Shenyu's identity. Chapter 2751. He glanced around, and indeed, he saw suspicion on the faces of some old foxes. Rong Yu Tianlan had always thought that he liked smart women, especially those who could see through things with just a hint, which would save him a lot of trouble. He felt that this kind of woman was very cute even if she had some tricks up her sleeve, so he admired Ning Xuema, who liked to pretend to be a pig to eat the tiger. The female friends he made were all smart women, and some of them could even be called sly. He could see through the tricks Ji Tianyue had played in front of him, but he didn't point it out because he felt that it was harmless. At least this little girl wasn't stupid and sweet, she was quite scheming. If he really married her in the future, it wouldn't be too tiring to get along with her. But this time, Ji Tianyue stepped on his bottom line. A little girl could be smart and sly, but she couldn't be without a bottom line. If even his sister, who had always been devoted to him, was scheming against him, then what wouldn't she be scheming against? Was she really the girl in his mind? While he was pondering, Ji Tianyue had already sorted out her emotions and jumped into the car. She held Ji Shenyue's hand and smiled. "Sister Shenyue, it's really you. I didn't recognize you just now because you were in disguise. I was so silly until now. I was still worried about how you would come. Sister, have your injuries healed? Does it still hurt? Does it feel uncomfortable?" The little girl chattered, her big eyes full of concern. "Oh right, sister, after you ran away, Brother Rong Yu has been very guilty, worried that your injuries would worsen. Although he wanted to break off the engagement with you, he didn't want you to delay your treatment because of this matter and make him feel guilty for the rest of his life. Fortunately, he finally found you and came with you. Seeing that sister is fine, I'm relieved." Ji Shenyue originally had a smile on her face, but after hearing Ji Tianyue's words, the smile on her face slowly turned cold. Did this little girl really think her sister was stupid? Her little sister's words sounded as if she was full of concern for her elder sister, but every word and sentence implied that the reason why Ji Shenyu and Rong Yu Tianlan appeared at the same time was because Rong Yu Tianlan felt guilty about her injuries. So she was concerned about her and went with her. She was still implying that Rong Yu Tianlan didn't love her, his fiancée. Although what the little girl said was all true, but to say it in front of so many people, her motives were not pure. She couldn't help but feel disgusted. After all, the little girl was still too inexperienced. She was still a bit too radical. However, this was also good. She had completely seen her younger sister's true colors. From now on, she could finally let go of her younger sister. There was one less thing to worry about in the palace, which was a good thing. Ji Shenyu naturally didn't want to argue with her sister at a time like this, and she was too lazy to do so. Moreover, no matter what Ji Tianyue's motive was, at least what she said was true. Rong Yu Tianlan had disguised herself and came to look for her. She felt wronged and became her coachman, probably because she felt guilty. In the morning, she was still surprised that the scars on her body had healed slightly. Now she finally found the reason. Rong Yuetian secretly healed her injuries again. This person was really obsessed with her injury. He probably wanted to use this to make up for the pain he had caused her by canceling the engagement. In fact, there was really no need for that. Ji Tianyue was still expressing her concern. Chapter 2752. Ji Tianyue was still expressing her concern, but Ji Xinyue was already impatient. She patted Ji Tianyue's shoulder lightly and said, "Tianyue, the palace drama is a good one. You can enjoy yourself. Forgive me for not keeping you company." She pushed her away and floated down. "It's getting late. Let's go in." She flew directly toward the entrance of the mountain. Ji Tianyue was speechless. She blinked her big eyes and tears came out. She looked at Rongyue Tianlan with grievance and said, "Brother Rongyue Tianyue, did Tianyue say something wrong?" Rongyue Tianlan looked at her with a complicated gaze. If it weren't for the fact that this little girl's appearance and temperament were highly similar to the girl in his memory, he wouldn't care about such a child at all. She should be taught a lesson. Otherwise, who knew what kind of ugly thing she would grow up to be? He said, "Don't make me think that you're repulsive. Repent and be saved." He rose and flew directly toward the entrance. Ji Tianyue was speechless. Her little face turned pale again. "Both of you, do you really want to break off the engagement?" The gatekeeper at the mountain gate asked again with uncertainty. These two gatekeepers were recognized as experts in the Fanning continent. No one knew how old these two people were. In the hearts of the people of the Fanning continent, these two people had been here since ancient times. They came to the Misty Mountain to break off the engagement, so those who came here were all resentful couples. These two people had seen countless resentful couples parting at the foot of the mountain. There were those who fought with swords, those who ignored each other, and those who were indifferent and resentful. In short, at a glance, there were all kinds of differences. However, these two people in front of her actually came in the same carriage. Looking at their interaction, they didn't look like resentful couples, but more like a young couple. Why would such people spend so much effort to come here to break off the engagement? Could it be that they were just angry? These two people looked like a perfect pair. Wouldn't it be a pity to throw away such a good marriage just because of anger? Therefore, the tall and thin traveler guarding the mountain gate couldn't help but ask this question. Ji Shenyue felt that his question was strange. Could it be that he came to the Misty Mountain for an engagement? If an engagement needed to be held here, and if it was so troublesome, her imperial father probably wouldn't have arranged such an unlucky marriage for her when she was still an infant. She nodded. That's right. That tall and skinny walker took another look at Rong Juishan. This person was holding a folding fan in his hand and had a smile at the corner of his mouth. There was nothing strange in his expression. He didn't look like he was here to cancel the engagement, but more like he was here for a walk. The two of you. Annulling the marriage is not a joke. Not only do you have to go through all kinds of checkpoints to go up the mountain, there is also a nearly fatal test waiting for you under the marriage pillar. Marriage is not easy to come by, you should cherish it. The tall and skinny walker was a warm-hearted person. Like the auntie of the neighborhood committee, he began to persuade Zhang Zian earnestly. Ji Shenyue frowned slightly. I understand all of this. Divine Lord, you don't have to persuade me. The tall and thin walker did not give up. But the two of you seem to be getting along quite well and friendly. You don't look like a resentful couple who is in a hurry to separate. Getting along well? The short and fat walker also added. The two of you look very friendly. You came in the same carriage, and he is even protecting you. He felt that the problem was with Ji Shenyue, so his words were directed at Ji Shenyue. Chapter 2753. Facing the two voidwalkers' earnest gazes, Ji Shenyue coughed and said, The two of you have misunderstood. This brother and I are actually brothers. It has nothing to do with politics. In order to make the two voidwalkers give up, she added, he already has someone in his heart, and I also have someone in my heart. We shouldn't delay each other any longer. So, we have to call it quits. The two walkers were speechless. The onlookers who were listening to the gossip behind them were also speechless. The two walkers looked at Rongyue Tianlan in unison. Rongyue Tianlan's face was expressionless. She just nodded and said, "Let's do as she says and let them go." The two walkers had done what they were supposed to do, so there was nothing else to say. The tall and thin walker listed out the procedures and taboos when entering the mountain to cancel the engagement. Only when the two walkers expressed that they had remembered everything did they start to prepare to open the mountain gate. The misty mountain was extremely dangerous. In order to prevent the ferocious beasts from accidentally running out and hurting people, the entire mountain was covered with a divine enchantment. Only the two mountain passes in the south and north of the mountain could be opened using special methods. Once inside, life and death would be up to fate. After a series of hand gestures from the two walkers, a blue light door appeared on the mountain wall. It was the real entrance to the mountain. This light door would last for half a quarter of an hour after it was opened, and it would automatically close after people entered. Once the people inside successfully canceled the engagement, the light door would automatically open again, allowing the two people inside to come out. Of course, two people would go in, but it might not be two people coming out. Ji Shenyue was a straightforward person. She turned around and was about to enter when someone called out from behind, "Boss Shen, wait." Ji Shenyue turned around. The three Qi brothers finally gathered their courage and squeezed over. Third Elder Qi handed over a scroll and said, "Boss Shen, you can't use spells inside. This scroll is called the Painting of Heaven and Earth. In an emergency, you can recite the spell and enter the painting to hide." Ji Shenyue's expression changed. She was experienced and knowledgeable, so she knew the origin of the Painting of Heaven and Earth. It was an extremely rare treasure, the heirloom of the Qi family. It did have the function that third young Master Qi had mentioned. Usually it would be a luxury to let others take a look at it. She didn't expect third young Master Qi to take it out for her to protect herself without batting an eye. This friendship. Ji Xinyu folded her sleeves and bowed. "Many thanks." She took the scroll from third young Master Qi's hands and said, "When I come out, I will personally pay you a visit and return it." She might not have any use for it, but she couldn't throw away the goodwill of others, so she accepted it without hesitation. Third young Master Qi's handsome face turned red again. This time he was so excited that he stuttered. No need to be so polite, Boss Shen. No, Your Highness, we're already very happy that you accepted our gift. Alright, take care. We will wait here for your triumphant return." Qi Lauer kicked him from behind. He was there to break off the engagement, not to go to war. What triumphant return? Ji Xinyu smiled. She really did treat these three as her brothers. She raised her hand and patted old Third Qi's shoulder. "Don't worry, this kind of place is just a piece of cake for me. I'll be out soon." She only realized that something was wrong after she patted his shoulder. She was dressed as a princess now, and it seemed a little too bold to pat a man's shoulder like this. As expected, the gazes of the people around her were a little subtle. She coughed and retracted her hand. The Qi brothers' feet were light as a feather. Chapter 2754. She coughed and withdrew her hand. The three Qi brothers felt as if they were floating, and their hearts were also floating. They retreated back into the crowd as if they were dreaming. The redness on third brother Qi's face did not fade, and his mind seemed to explode with fireworks. Not only did such a noble princess ride in the same carriage as them for a few days, she even lowered herself to become friends with them. She really did treat them as friends. Too happy, too excited. He wasn't dreaming, right? He pinched his thigh, wanting to see if he was dreaming or not. It didn't hurt. Could it really be a dream? Third brother, why are you pinching my thigh? Second brother Qi asked darkly. Third young Master Qi. The crowd suddenly parted, and Changbu Bai walked forward with large strides. He had clearly rushed here in a hurry, and there were even beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. His body was also covered in dust. He did not exchange any pleasantries, and directly handed over a blood-red object to Ji Xinyu. Your Highness, I, Changbu Bai, will only serve you in this life. This is Qilin resin that this one just hunted. Perhaps it will be of use to the princess. Qilin resin was an extremely rare type of fungus. and it was an excellent medicine for treating red wounds. No matter how serious the injury was, even if an arm was torn off, as long as this fingernail-sized bit was applied, it would immediately stop the bleeding. It was something that martial artists yearned for even in their dreams. Because it was rare and extremely difficult to harvest, it was considered a priceless treasure in the entire continent. Ji Xinyu looked at Chang Bubai's sweaty appearance and knew that he had specially come to harvest it for her. This kind of friendship could not be rejected. She accepted it without hesitation. Many thanks, Brother Chang. Chang Bubai usually spoke harshly, but to the people he truly admired he was sincere. No need to be courteous, princess. This one wishes the princess a smooth return. Even Shi Shuangcheng came over to join in the fun. He was worthy of being a prince of the Western Sky Clan, and his actions were generous. He directly handed over an exquisite pagoda sparkling with treasure light to Ji Xinyu, and directly called her by her name. Xinyu, this is the Stupa Pagoda. It can imprison all evil spirits. If you encounter a troublesome evil spirit, you can use this pagoda. Any evil spirit below heavenly demon level will be dealt with in this pagoda. Come take it. Ji Xinyu, the onlookers. She naturally knew about this pagoda. It was one of the 10 great ancient divine artifacts, and should be regarded as the national treasure of the Western Sky Clan. Furthermore, it had a very special function. It was said that this item was part of Shi Shuangcheng's mother's dowry. His mother valued this item very much and directly said that this item could only be given to her future daughter-in-law. In other words, this item could be used as a token of love. Now that Xishuang City had sent this to Ji Xinyu, the meaning behind it was obvious. Shi Shuangcheng also had something else to say. Xinyu, I will wait here for you to successfully cancel the engagement. When you come out, I will hold a celebratory feast for you, and then bring you back. He looked at Ji Xinyu as if he was looking at his fiancée, and he was trying to poach her openly. Ji Xinyu. Everyone felt that their horizons had been broadened. This show was very satisfying. Countless gazes were cast towards Rong Yuetian, wanting to see what expression her current fiancé would have when he saw such a scene. Rong Yuishanlin stood there, lightly tapping the handle of the fan in her palm. She didn't seem to be out of the ordinary. Ji Xinyu did not want to accept such a gift. Chapter 2755. But he had kindly offered himself to her, so she had to be tactful in rejecting him. Ji Xinyu was about to reject him, but Rong Yuetianlan's arms suddenly rested on her shoulder, as if they were close brothers. All right, if we dilly-dally any longer, this door will close. Brother, let's go in. Ji Xinyu was shocked by the word brother, and her hair stood on end when he hugged her. She was about to use her power to shake off his wolf arm, but he had already taken her and leaped into the blue door, disappearing without a trace. Everyone was also shocked by Rong Yuetianlan's actions, and they all looked at each other, unable to guess what was going on. The two gatekeepers also shook their heads. There were actually many strange people who came to handle the marriage annulment ceremony, but they had never seen such a strange pair before. After Rong Yuetianlan and Ji Xinyu leaped in, the blue door disappeared. Everyone watched the show, and some left contentedly, while some felt that it was not enough and wanted to see the final result. So they simply set up camp here and waited for the two to come out. Ji Tianyu stood in front of the big rock, where the blue door had once appeared, staring at it in a daze. She pursed her lips, ignoring everyone's strange gazes, and also set up a tent in the valley, waiting for them to come out. Ji Xinyu felt that it was not an exaggeration to describe the mountain in front of her as piercing through the clouds. When she was outside the mountain, she looked up and saw that the misty mountain was not very high. At least she could see the peak. But after entering, she did not know if it was a visual effect, but the mountain was covered in clouds, and the main peak was directly submerged in the clouds, and she could not see the peak at all. There were no roads in the mountain, and the occasional winding path was created by the fierce beasts in the mountain, and some of their feces were still fresh. From the depths of the valley came the low growls and roars of various fierce beasts, making one's hair stand on end. Because spells could not be used here, no matter how high the mountain was, One could only climb it, and could not fly. Eighth Highness, let's part here, and meet under the marriage pillar at the top of the mountain, Ji Xinyue suggested. According to the rules mentioned by the two gatekeepers, it would be best if the two people who entered the mountain did not help each other. Otherwise, the hardships they would encounter would be doubled. Ji Xinyue only wanted to settle this matter as soon as possible, and didn't want to cause any more trouble. So she felt that it would be better for the two of them to go separately. Rong Yuetian glanced at her, and hugged her arms. Brother Ji, are you sure you can do it yourself? She didn't know what was wrong with this guy. Ever since he came in, he kept calling her Brother Ji, which made her hair stand on end. His gaze was clearly filled with distrust towards her martial arts. Ji Xinyue frowned slightly. I don't care about such a small mountain path. I've been to places that were even more dangerous than this. Not to mention that I have a magic treasure in my hands. She flashed the map of the universe scroll and added, the two messengers also said that since they are here to break off the engagement, the two of them should be indifferent to each other. Once they help each other, I feel that I can watch someone die and not save them. Rangi Yuishinlin interrupted her. She clasped the folding fan in her hand. Her smile was like the mountain wind, a little cold. Ji Xinyue blurted out, you can do it, but I may not be able to do it. Rangi Yuishinlin closed the folding fan. Her eyes flashed slightly and focused on her face. So you're saying that you... Dearest, it's the end of the month. Everyone take a look, and see if there are any monthly votes in your pockets. Sometimes you don't see them today, but there will be another one popping up tomorrow. Cough cough, Mumu urgently needs monthly votes. Wax. Chapter 2756. Ji Xinyue looked at him sincerely. Your Highness, you don't have to think too much. The only good thing about me is that I'm kind. Even if I see a dog or cat in danger, I'll reach out to save it, let alone someone in danger. What if I can't help but reach out to help and increase the danger we're in? It's not worth it, right? So let's split up. She didn't want to talk about it anymore, so she directly gave him a choice. How about this? There are two routes up the mountain. If you go east, I'll go west. Rongyue Tianlong glanced at her and smiled faintly. You're really impatient. He turned around and ran towards the west, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Ji Xinyue breathed a sigh of relief and ran towards the east route. Ji Xinyue felt that she was experienced and knowledgeable, but coming to this dangerous place called the Sacred Mountain was still an eye-opener for her. She had never seen most of the plants along the way. Some were crystal clear and made people want to pick them, while some were colorful but made people's hair stand on end. No matter what kind, Ji Xinyue couldn't touch them, because according to folklore, not a single blade of grass or tree in the misty mountain could be taken down the mountain, or else a catastrophe would befall. Of course, there were also many fierce beasts in this mountain, and there were all kinds of them. There were saber-toothed tigers with wings, silver wolves with horns on their heads, and even snake monsters that were dozens of feet long and had the appearance of a snake, but had countless centipede legs on their bodies. Among them, the saber-toothed tiger and the snake monster had attacked her before, but after a fierce battle, they were all dead souls under her broadsword. After running for a day and a night, she had already reached the mountainside. In this one day and night, she encountered 2 saber-toothed tigers, 3 silver wolves, 6 human bears, 8 bone eagles, and more than 10 other unknown ferocious beasts. It could be said that she had climbed up by stepping on the blood of various fierce beasts. Even though she had good stamina and high martial arts, she was still a little tired after a busy day. She lowered her head and looked at the broadsword in her hand. The originally green broadsword was now dark red, because it had drunk the blood of all kinds of beasts. It looked a little fierce, and the blade was also a little curled. She found a large rock and sat down. She raised her hand to wipe the sweat off her forehead and shook her numb arm. She was actually a little puzzled. According to the rules mentioned by the 2 gatekeepers, if the 2 of them walked separately, they would not encounter too much trouble unless there were special circumstances. As long as one maintained a calm heart and mind, they would be able to pass safely. But hadn't she encountered too many dangers along the way? There were not many women in this world who were truly skilled in martial arts. It could be said that they were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Most of the women who came here to cancel their marriage were ordinary women. If these women were to encounter these ferocious beasts here, just one of them would probably take their lives. There was no need to wait for the marriage annulment ceremony. On the other hand, she had encountered so many of them in one go, and every single one of them seemed to want to kill her, forcing her to deal with them with all her might. Could it be that the monsters that appeared here were automatically refreshed according to the actual abilities of the people who entered? Her martial arts were high, so these fierce beasts that ran out were fiercer than the previous one, and the higher she went, the fiercer the beast she encountered. Ji Shinyu could not figure it out no matter how much she thought about it, so she simply stopped thinking about it. Chapter 2757. She ate a piece of rations, then polished the broadsword on a rock before putting it away. The climate here was extremely strange. The plants here looked like tropical plants, but once night fell, the weather would be extremely cold. Even the leaves of the trees were covered with a thick layer of ice armor. What was even stranger was that this kind of cold didn't seem to come from the outside world, but rather from the inside of a person's bones. Ji Shinyu had been running and fighting all this time, so she didn't feel anything. But now that she had nothing to do, the cold immediately spread throughout her body. She sat there in a daze for a moment, and a thin layer of ice had already formed on her eyelashes. She cursed under her breath, "This damned place. Looks like it doesn't want people to rest." But she was really tired. After not being able to use spells, her body's functions weren't as good as before. At most a bit stronger than a normal person. She used to be full of energy after fighting monsters for 3 days and 3 nights. But now after running for 1 day and 1 night, she felt her hands trembling and her legs weak, as if she was powerless. If she ran into a beast in this state, it would be dangerous, so she needed to rest. She found a leeward mountain wall, cleared the surroundings, and made a fire. Then, she sprinkled a circle of sulfur around her to prevent snakes and insects before sitting on a tree stump to rest. The night here was also different from other places. The moon outside was both round and incomplete. Even when she came here, it was still a crescent moon. However, the moon here had always been round. It hung there like a wheel. Its color was golden with a hint of purple, looking strange yet beautiful. Ji Shinyu looked at the moon for a while, watching it become more and more purple, brighter and brighter. She didn't know why, but the color of the moon gave her a strange feeling of familiarity. She closed her eyes, wanting to take a nap, but unexpectedly, she was too tired and fell asleep in a daze. She had a dream. In the dream, there seemed to be a woman dancing under the moonlight. She couldn't see the woman's face clearly, but faintly felt that the woman was extremely beautiful and even familiar. She couldn't help but want to take a closer look. But unexpectedly, after a cold wind, the surroundings suddenly became a world of ice and snow. The woman was lying in the snow. She didn't seem to be injured, but there was blood flowing out of her mouth. It seemed like she was poisoned. What was even stranger was that Ji Shinyu could clearly see that her lips were bleeding, but she still couldn't see her face clearly, as if there was a thin veil between them. She could only vaguely feel extreme despair and extreme coldness, making her heart feel as if it was weighed down by a weight, falling and falling. Just as she was about to walk closer, a thick fog suddenly appeared around her. The woman in the fog seemed to be carrying ice and snow as she whispered into her ear, "Don't fall in love with him." His voice was like a line of ice, directly entering Ji Shinyu's ears, causing her to shiver. "Don't fall in love with anyone?" She couldn't help but ask. "Don't love him, don't love him." The voice kept repeating in Ji Shinyu's ears. Every time it was repeated, her body would turn cold. In the end, she felt as if her entire body was frozen like an ice pillar. She was impatient and was about to shout, "Who is he?" when a warm current suddenly rushed through her frozen body. She trembled and woke up. The fog in front of her quickly dispersed, and her vision became dark. When she came to her senses, she found that her eyes were closed. Chapter 2758. She tried her best to open her eyes, but her eyelids seemed to be glued together, and she couldn't open them for a while. It was as if she was frozen. Her body was obviously cold to the bone, but there was also a trace of warmth from the outside world that flowed into her body. She felt like she was an ice shell, and her soul was bound in this ice shell. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't break free, and that trace of warmth seemed to be trying its best to pull her out of this ice shell. This was the first time she had encountered such a situation. She suppressed her panic and tried her best to feel the warmth, and then let the warmth come to her eyelids gradually. She felt the ice melting from the corners of her eyes. She tried her best to open her eyes, and finally lifted her eyelids. Then, she was so shocked that her eyelids trembled, and they were almost frozen together again. When she was sleeping, she was resting next to a fire, but when she opened her eyes, she found that the fire was gone. In front of her was a lump of ice that looked like a fire. There seemed to be a flame in the lump of ice that was directly frozen, and it looked very strange and terrifying. This wasn't the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was that she herself had become an ice sculpture. Her body was wrapped in a large layer of ice, and her whole body was frozen solid, becoming a sitting ice sculpture. Because she was facing the stone wall, half of her body was frozen with the big stone on her left, and she couldn't even move a finger. No wonder she dreamed of a world of ice and snow. No wonder she dreamed of being surrounded by cold wind. It turned out that in reality, she was frozen into a lump of ice. She rolled her eyes and looked at the moon in the sky. The moon had just moved to the west, but it was still far from dawn. If she didn't think of a way to thaw it in time, she was afraid that she would lose her life here. The moment she realized that her situation was bad, she began to circulate the inner force in her body, trying to use it to thaw the layer of ice outside. But after a while, she knew that this method didn't work. The circulation of inner force could indeed thaw the ice, but the layer of ice on her body wasn't ordinary. Only a trace of warmth on her back, circulating around her mouth and nose, could make her blood flow slightly better. Otherwise, she would have been frozen into a lump long ago, and she wouldn't even be able to breathe. There was someone behind her. At this time, the person behind her could only be Rongyue Tianlan. Ji Xinyue's heart jumped, and she couldn't help but ask, "Eighth Highness?" There was no movement behind her. "Hey, Rongyue Tianlan, is that you?" There was still no response from behind her. She couldn't even hear anyone's aura behind her. Ji Xinyu felt a little scared. "Hey, say something." Her voice was muffled by a layer of ice. Finally, there was some movement behind her. A gust of wind seemed to blow beside her ear, as if someone had sighed beside her ear. Ji Xinyue's hair stood on end. "Rongyue Tianlan, why are you pretending to be mysterious again?" She choked on her words. There was a slight rustling sound behind her. Then her vision blurred, and a face appeared in front of her. When Ji Xinyu saw this face clearly, her mouth fell open, and her heart almost stopped beating. It should be a human face. The reason why he said it should be was because the shape of the face was indeed that of a human face, but it had no facial features. She even had long hair on her face. If one looked at her back, they might even think that she was a beauty. But what Ji Xinyu saw was a face that was like a puppet's, without any facial features. And this face was right in front of her on the ice shell, just a centimeter away from her face. Chapter 2759. What kind of monster was this? Ji Xinyu's feet were almost cold. Her body was already cold, but this time, it was even colder. The monster's face and her face were separated by a thin layer of ice for a while. Suddenly, it raised its head and moved away a little. Ji Xinyu's eyes could finally see something else, and she could also see the monster's general appearance. She almost gasped. The monster's upper body was indeed human, and it was even wearing a robe. But its lower body was a python. The white snake's scales brushed past the ice around her, making a swishing sound. The snake's body almost wrapped around her entire body. A snake beauty? But how could such a face without any facial features be considered a beauty? Ji Xinyu's body was frozen in the ice shell, unable to move. She could only watch as the snake beauty coiled around her, causing her hair to stand on end. The snake beauty circled around her a few times, as if it wanted to remove the layer of ice around her, looking for a way out. Ji Xinyu even saw its tail slap her face. This situation was like a nightmare. The snake beauty coiled its head back and faced her face again. Then, a thin slit appeared where its mouth was, and the slit grew bigger and bigger. It twisted into the shape of a mouth, and suddenly a human voice came out. "Why don't you have a face?" This voice also sounded like it was made by a machine, and it was indescribably strange. Ji Xinyu didn't know what it was doing, and she didn't know why it said this. She didn't have time to think about this, and her mind was filled with thoughts of how to escape. How can the person in your heart not have a face? Have you never thought of love? Have you never thought of men? The snake beauty continued, its voice full of doubt. Ji Xinyu. The snake beauty moved its head closer. "Tell me, what kind of man do you like? Try to picture his face in your mind." Ji Xinyu stared at it without saying anything. The snake beauty lowered its head, as if thinking for a moment, and then slowly raised its head. Ji Xinyu was shocked. This time, the snake beauty finally had a face. His brows were like distant mountains, his eyes were like autumn waves, his nose was like a jade carving, and his lips were like a painted pill. His long eyelashes fluttered like two little fans, and right now, he was blinking at Ji Xinyu. "Do you like this?" His voice was neutral, and even seductive. Ji Xinyu's heart trembled, and she bluntly spat out two words. "Transvestite." The expression in the snake beauty's eyes dimmed, and those soul-stirring eyes lost their luster. "You don't like it?" Her voice was as bitter as an abandoned wife. Ji Xinyu rolled her eyes and ignored it. Only a ghost would like a transvestite that was neither male nor female. The snake beauty lowered her head again, and when she raised it again, her expression had completely changed. His sword-like eyebrows flew straight to his temples, his starry eyes were sharp and spirited, and his thin lips were pursed like the edge of a knife. He looked like a proud and indifferent hero. At this moment, this hero's face was looking down at her, and he said proudly, "Do you like this, young master?" Ji Xinyu. Monster. In other words, she still didn't like it. That hero's face frowned, and this time, it didn't lower its head, and its facial features directly undulated in front of Ji Xinyu's eyes, like a clay figurine. A moment later, it changed its face again. This time, his face was bronze, his eyes were like copper bells, and there was even a beard growing out of his lips. He looked like a majestic man. Chapter 2760. The man scowled at her. "Little girl, you must like how manly I am now." Ji Xinyu. She had the urge to throw something at his face. She simply lowered her eyes, not looking at the snake beauty's various facial expressions. The snake beauty seemed to have seen a lot of people, changing one face after a while, and another after a while, changing faces like a Sichuan opera. The people it changed into had all kinds of personalities, all kinds of characteristics, and even their voices changed with their faces. When it should be feminine, when it should be feminine, when it should be boorish, when it should be boorish. The snake beauty used all its skills, as if it wouldn't give up until it changed into a face that Ji Xinyu liked. Ji Xinyu didn't have such a bad taste. In the end, she just closed her eyes and let it do whatever it wanted. So much time had passed, it should be dawn soon, right? Once the sun came out, the mountain would immediately turn into a scorching heat, and the ice on her body would automatically melt. Once she regained her freedom, she would immediately cut this perverted snake into 17 or 18 pieces. Let's see if it can still do this. At first, Ji Xinyu thought that the ice on her body was caused by the snake beauty, but after a while she knew that wasn't the case. This was because when the snake beauty circled around her, the mouth that had transformed into a human would extend its fangs from time to time, gnawing here and there on the ice around her body. It was obvious that the snake beauty wanted to break the ice and swallow her. It seemed that although the ice made her suffer a lot, it had also become her protective armor. The snake beauty kept showing off all kinds of handsome faces to her. It definitely wasn't because it was bored. It must be because it was particular about something. Although Ji Xinyu couldn't figure out the reason, she didn't want to run away with its transformation. especially since the snake beauty had a pair of charming eyes. When it stared at her, Ji Xinyu had a feeling that it could read the deepest part of her heart. This feeling was uncomfortable, so Ji Xinyu let the snake do whatever it wanted and didn't look at it. Time passed minute by minute, and the moon in the sky moved inch by inch to the west. The snake became more and more irritable, desperately trying to make Ji Xinyu look at it again. But she just wouldn't open her eyes. "Haha, I know you must like people like this one." A clear and magnetic voice suddenly sounded in Ji Xinyu's ears, with its usual languid and casual tone. Ji Xinyu's heart trembled as she subconsciously opened her eyes. In front of him was a familiar face that could topple cities. Black hair, a blue robe, a folding fan and a faint smile. This was clearly Rongyue Tianlan's face. The snake beauty's transformation technique was still extremely advanced. Other than the lower half of its snake body, the upper half of its body could transform into anything. Even the scales on its body could change according to the person's identity. The robe covered its lower body. At a glance, it looked like Rong Tianlan was right in front of it. It slowly approached Ji Xinyu's side, its watery eyes looking at her. "Xinyu, you actually like me, right?" Its expression and bearing were extremely similar to Rong Yuetian's. Even the way it held the fan was exactly the same. Ji Xinyu's heart skipped a beat. She looked at it from the corner of her eyes. "What nonsense are you talking about? Say that she liked Rongyue Tianlan? Was this snake still asleep?" She had always been indifferent to this person. When they first met, she was even disgusted. Although she wasn't disgusted now, her mood would be inexplicably terrible every time she saw him. Chapter 2761. Although she didn't dislike him anymore, every time she saw him, her mood would be inexplicably terrible. She had the urge to kick him far away. Although this feeling was strange, it couldn't be love, right? She knew that her feelings towards Rongyue Tianlan were very complicated, and even she couldn't figure it out. But it could be said that she instinctively hated him. It could also be said that they were not on the same path. They could even be strangers. At most, she could treat him as an ordinary friend. The only thing she couldn't say was that she liked him. Even if she liked Rongyue Tianhuan, it was impossible for her to like this Eighth Highness. However, the snake beauty opposite her became happy. It moved closer to her and tapped the ice layer near her face with its fan. It looked at her with sparkling eyes. "You like me, but you don't dare to admit it. Even in the depths of your heart, you rejected it because your subconscious thought that I was the source of so much harm to you. You instinctively felt that I was dangerous, and you were afraid that you would be hurt beyond redemption. So you buried your heart deep. You buried it too deep, and even you were deceived. You actually hypnotized yourself that you would never like me." The snake beauty spoke slowly, using Rongyue Tianlan's voice. It was elegant, but it pierced straight into one's heart. It moved closer and closer to her, its handsome face almost touching hers. Its eyes seemed to have a whirlpool that wanted to suck in a person's soul. Ji Xinyu looked as if she was hypnotized. She didn't speak anymore. Ripples flashed across the snake beauty's eyes, as if it was proud. It slowly leaned its forehead against Ji Xinyu's forehead. "Little Xinyu, admit it. You like me. I am the person in the depths of your dreams, the love of your life. For me, you can give up anything, even your life." Ji Xinyu seemed to be completely under its control. She repeated what it said. However, she changed the relationship. For example, she said the last two sentences. "For you, I can give up anything, even my life." The snake beauty smiled in satisfaction. "Good girl." Long tentacles extended from the hair on its head, drilling towards Ji Xinyu's forehead. Tentacles were originally extremely soft and tender, but this snake beauty's tentacle was like a sharp needle, slowly piercing into the layer of ice that even its fangs couldn't bite through. The blood-red line was about to touch Ji Xinyu's skin on her forehead. The snake beauty's eyes grew brighter and brighter, and the scales all over her body trembled in excitement. This woman was a rare divine monarch, and she was still a virgin. Her blood was the purest, and her soul was the purest. As long as its tentacles pierced her forehead, it would be able to suck her brain juice and devour her soul. Its power would increase tremendously, and it might even be able to transform into a human. Just as the blood-red tentacle was about to touch Ji Xunyu's forehead, her eyes suddenly blinked, and a mocking smile appeared on her lips. "I like you? Are you out of your mind?" The snake beauty was stunned. The blood-red tentacles seemed to have hit an extremely hard barrier, and could not move forward any further. Not only that, but the small part that had drilled into the ice was also frozen by the ice. What was even more bizarre was that the ice seemed to be contagious. It quickly spread along the tentacles to the top of the snake beauty's head. The snake beauty's expression changed greatly. This woman wasn't fooled. He didn't fall for its hypnotic spell. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened. It desperately tried to pull back its tentacles. But how could it do that in such a short time? Chapter 2762. It was also at this moment that Ji Xunyu, who had been trapped in the ice and unable to move, suddenly moved. She abruptly raised her arm, and with a crashing sound, the ice around her shattered in an instant. A large saber appeared in her palm, and the saber light rippled with a circle of bright light under the moonlight. It directly chopped down on the top of the snake beauty's head, where her tentacles were. The snake beauty let out an extremely shrill hiss, and her entire body, no, the entire snake suddenly split from the middle, split in half. It was a standard split in half, with both sides of the same size. Even if one were to measure with a ruler, one might not be able to split it so evenly. The two halves of the snake beauty's body fell in two different directions, and milky white blood splattered in the air like a flower, and then sprayed on the ground. As if it was raining milky white blood, Ji Xunyu retreated in time, and did not get sprayed by the snake's blood. She took a light breath. Her hand that seemed to be holding the knife was very steady, but the cold sweat in her palm had almost soaked the handle of the knife. Just a little bit more. She had almost fallen into this stinky snake's trap. She had almost been led by the nose by this stinky snake. Fortunately, she had woken up in time. Her feelings towards Rongyu Tianlan were indeed a little complicated, and unlike other people, she seemed to hold a grudge against him. But the most important thing was that this person had affected her whole life, and caused her life to be a lot bumpy. Wasn't it normal for her to have such feelings towards such a person, saying that she liked him, and that she would be willing to die for him? She was talking in her sleep. If possible, she would rather let him die. She kicked half of the snake's body and sneered. "I like him? Who does he think he is? He's a playboy. And I don't want him even if he was given to me for free. You even transformed into his appearance to seduce me, and even asked me to die for him. Is your brain made of tofu? TSK, if you didn't transform into him, I might have been merciful and left you with an intact corpse. But since you've turned into him, then don't blame me for using you to practice my knife." At this point, she seemed to have noticed something. She raised her head abruptly, and the broadsword in her hand almost chopped down subconsciously. Not far away stood a person with picturesque features and a poetic elegance. He held an oil paper umbrella in his hand, and his ink-black hair draped over his shoulders. He stood in the white snow with the umbrella slightly slanted. The green trees and rocks behind him served as a foil to him. It was Rongyu Tianlan. His eyes were as deep as two wells as he faintly said, "Did you have a good time chopping them, Ji Xunyue?" She looked at the dead snake that had been cut into two halves on the ground, and then looked at him. She gripped her knife warily. She clearly saw Rongyu Tianlan heading towards the west. Logically speaking, her route shouldn't coincide with his. How could he appear here? Could it be that this was a clone of the stinky snake? Ji Xunyu really wanted to give it another try. However, the aura of the person in front of him was too strong. She was no different from the real Rongyu Tianlan. Ji Xunyu couldn't decide whether to cut her or not. In the blink of an eye, Rongyu Tianlan had already arrived in front of her. It was a dangerous distance, less than a foot away from her. He was within the attack range of her broadsword. Ji Xunyu felt a little itchy. He tilted his head and looked at her. The corners of his lips curled up slightly, and he smiled gently. "Do you want to try cutting me again?" He was dressed casually, and a faint cold fragrance lingered at the tip of her nose, making her nervous for no reason. Was this real? You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.